Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to call this meeting to order. This is the June 10th Howell Township Workshop meeting. It is approximately 6:35. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the opening statement and call the roll?
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this workshop meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner. By the posting of a copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on December 28, 2007. By the faxing of a copy of said notice to the Asbury Park Press, Tri-Town News, and Star Ledger for publication on December 28, 2007. By the filing of a copy of said form of notice in the Township Clerk's office on December 28, 2007. The public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. The public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting and between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of Public Law 1975, Chapter 127. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with 3 emergency exits for your safety. The locations are as follows. Upon exiting the meeting room to the rear, there to immediate left and immediate right, and at the front of the meeting room at the left of the dais. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcasts on Howell Township TV 77. Roll call, Mrs. Dalton.
She's not presently here.
Mr. Howell.
Here.
Mrs. Showmaker.
She will not be here this evening.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mayor DeBella.
Here. Okay, I believe we have reason to go into executive session. Is that right, Mrs. Schlegel?
Yes, Mayor. Attorney-client privilege, personnel, and litigation.
Okay, Ms. Woolman, would you please read the necessary statement for closed session?
Whereas Title 10, Chapter 4, Section 13 of the New Jersey Revised Statutes require that the public shall not be excluded from any meeting of a public body unless a resolution authorizing such exclusion is adopted at a public meeting, whereas the Township Council of the Township of Howell has determined that such a closed meeting is required to discuss certain matters which are exempted from consideration with the public in attendance under New Jersey Revised Statutes 10:4-12. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Howell that the public shall be excluded from the next portion of this meeting and that the Township Council will reconvene in public session thereafter. Be it further resolved that minutes will be kept of the meeting in closed session and the time and the circumstances under which a discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public cannot be determined at this time.
Okay, we need a motion, please.
So moved, Mayor. Second,
I
Mayor.
have a motion and a second. Any comments or remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, we expect to come back out of executive session within the hour. Thank you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to reconvene this meeting to order. This is the Howell Township Council's workshop meeting of June the 10th. Time is approximately 7:35. Let the record reflect that we did appropriately open this meeting at approximately 6:30 and had the necessary roll call. I would ask that at this time everyone please stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would just ask that everyone also please remain standing for a moment, a silent observation in thought of the many troops that defend this country all over the world. In addition, it was brought to my attention that former Fire Chief Joe Gilson from the Ramtown Fire Company passed away last week. Fire Chief Gilson was a longtime community servant in Howell Township, served the people of Ramtown for many years as chief and also as a volunteer firefighter. So I'd ask that we all please remember Chief Gilson in our prayers as well. Thank you. I'm going to ask that the council please join me in the front of the room for a presentation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It continues to always be a real pleasure when the council and I have an opportunity to recognize someone from our community that has done something special, something unique, something extraordinary, and tonight is no exception. And recently a resident, where's Robert Nicastro? Mr. Nicastro, is he in the chambers? Mr. Nicastro, not only is he a very active resident, he's apparently a baseball talent scout. Because Mr. Nicastro was kind enough to call to my attention the fact that we have a a resident of our community who I'm going to ask to come up here, Anthony DiSclafani. Where is he? Anthony, why don't you come on up, Anthony? I'd like to tell you about Anthony, who is a Howell Township resident who really has a number of big things in store for him. Pleasure to meet you. His mom came up to me before the meeting started and was kind enough to prepare for me a whole bio, which really speaks to just how proud his mom is of Anthony's accomplishments. We asked Anthony to be here because this past week he was drafted by a Major League Baseball team. And that is one of the reasons we asked him to be here. I'll save the team for maybe for last. Mom and I had to talk about this. But Anthony has been a varsity letterman since he was a freshman at Colts Neck High School. He was on the All-Monmouth County first team in both 2006 and 07. He helped capture the first ever Shore Conference Championship title for Colts Neck High School during his junior season. He holds career records at Colts Neck High School for wins, innings pitched, strikeouts, and complete games. He represented the USA Baseball Babe Ruth team in Cary, North Carolina last summer. He represented the Northeast at the East Coast Pro Showcase in Lakeland, Florida this past summer. He represented the New York Yankees scout team, #1, his ever appearance at the Area Code Games in California last summer. He earned Best Control Award at the Area Code Baseball Games by Baseball America. He signed a national letter of intent at the University of Florida in November of 07. He was named the 2008 Louisville Slugger High School All-American, selected by the staff of the Collegiate Baseball newspaper. He was nominated to High School Coaches Association All-American Team just this month, June of 08. He was named as All-State Pitcher in June of 08, and most significantly for him, he was drafted on the 6th by the Boston Red Sox. In preparation for tonight, I've talked to several people who have legitimately said that there are very few people who have ever come out of Howell that have played baseball that are even anywhere near what you've accomplished and your level of talent. I've heard that from many people that have seen you. So we like to recognize people who've done something real special, and you have, and I see you have a number of members of your family here, fans and family, and really on behalf of the council and I and the township, I'm pleased to present this certificate of achievement to you, presented on this 10th day of June, for displaying outstanding ability and talent and your many accomplishments, successes in baseball. I'm sure it's much more than baseball. There's probably a bio that I could read on for hours about all that you've accomplished, because to do what you've done requires discipline, hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of maturity, and I just want to congratulate you on behalf of the people of Howell. Wish you all the best. Anything you'd like to say?
I just want to thank you. It was an honor to be recognized by the Howell board and everybody. I really have to say thanks to my parents and family for supporting me, and my dad always helped me through the years. I appreciate it, and my mom supported me always. That's really all I have to say.
Now we have this one final thing. When you make it to the Red Sox and you play the Yankees, you're going to have to go easy on us. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Sure.
What do you say now?
My daughter.
She could be a dry pick.
Okay, I'm going to call the, and folks, you're certainly not obligated to stay. You can, you're welcome to, but good luck to you all. Thank you very much.
It may interest you. Come back.
Not likely.
Everybody else can move up.
Okay, I'm going to call the council's attention back to our agenda. We have reports of township officials. Mrs. Schlegel, we'll start with you. What do you have for us tonight?
Yes, Mayor, just one thing. I wanted to let the residents know that the road paving schedule of road closures is on our website.
Okay. That's it?
That's it, Mayor.
Okay. Moving right along. Mrs. Dalton, you have anything under reports?
Nothing this evening, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Howell.
Mayor, I just wanted to recognize the girls softball team from Middle School South. For the third year in a row, they've won the middle school championship. We'll be having them here at the meeting on July 15th.
I believe that's the right date.
Right. They'll be here. We'll be recognizing them again. And also, I reached out to Mr. Bathgate's office, and Mr. Bathgate was kind enough to make arrangements for the girls to use his suite at the Lakewood Blue Claws game on July 25th. So I'd like to thank Mr. Bathgate for that. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, anything on the reports?
Not this evening, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, and I just want to pass out for the council's consideration, no need to discuss it tonight. I received a letter from the mayor of Marlborough, Mayor Jonathan Hornick. I think it also went to Mrs. Schlegel. Mayor Hornick is hosting a meeting on Tuesday, July 15th at 6:30. He's inviting other communities in Monmouth to meet in Marlborough to talk about shared services with Marlborough Township. Apparently, Marlborough has already opened up conversations with Manalapan, and apparently they've realized some success. Now, obviously, we're not a contiguous border community, but apparently there will be other Monmouth Township communities that are there, and the evening is slated to be an open discussion regarding how to come up with shared services. So, Mrs. Schlegel, I'm going to pass this around to you. Perhaps a member of the council will be able to attend that meeting, or perhaps if we have I don't recall if we have a meeting. Do we have a council meeting that evening?
On the 15th, yes.
Yeah, so we'll all be here. Perhaps your office can
send a
representative on our behalf, since we'll be in a regular session. And in addition, I don't know if the rest of the council got it. I did get correspondence from Alex DeCroce, who is the Republican minority leader, with a whole series of recommendations to propose to the governor about changes to the state budget. And it comes with an accompanying resolution that I guess most municipalities have been asked to consider and have been asked to pass and send to the governor. Obviously, the council would need time to review it and workshop it. It was not scheduled for this evening, but perhaps for our next workshop session, we can put it on there. Having reviewed it and being absolutely opposed to the governor's current budget, in light of the many difficulties it creates for our community, I would hope that we would review that at our next workshop session and consider adopting it or amending it as might be necessary. Anything else under reports from anyone? All right, moving right along.
Mayor, I would just like to say,
Go right
for the
ahead.
record, we are in the first week of our paving contract for 2008.
Terrific.
It's about a 6-week process, and there is a link on the Township website, on the little box for Township News. It's got a road paving schedule, and for the people whose roads are actually going to be paved, I've spoke to the contractor today. It's roughly an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. paving process. So in the mornings, they'll be able to get out. School buses will be able to get through, essential services and et cetera. And they are putting notifications on the individual mailboxes, so people will be aware. The schedule is subject to somewhat of a change. There's a somewhat revised schedule that I will have posted tomorrow. But if anybody wants to see the 4 to 5 week schedule, it is on the website.
Great, okay.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Nunziata, when we've entered into that contract, did it have a clause in there that if fuel was up, it would cost us more to pave the roads?
Yes, there's an asphalt AC index multiplier, yes.
How much more is it costing us to do those roads than we originally anticipated and budgeted for?
In March, we actually advertised, opened the bids, and from March to today, the June price is a 43% increase.
Oh, hold on. That just made my heart skip a beat. Okay?
It's roughly a 10% increase in the contract price.
Okay, so,
10% overall based on a 43% increase in fuel.
That's correct.
okay. You said 43% first.
The price of the asphaltic cement, which is the petroleum-based product, has gone up 43% in the last 3 months.
So how much did we budget for this year?
The
For
contract
roads?
came in at about 1.7 million.
And we had budgeted 1.5 or 1.55, wasn't
No,
it?
we were up a little more than that. We're about 1.8, 1.9. But we actually have monies from other capital projects that we're able to, get a certification of funds and pave the whole entire project.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you.
terrific. Please keep us updated
Certainly.
in the event that there's any change in that paving schedule. Okay, I'm going to call the council's attention to 6A, which is public comment on any consent agenda items. and since this is a workshop meeting, it's really only consent agenda we're acting on this evening. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm looking to see, under consent agenda, Mrs. Woolman, is there any item that we are acting on this evening? Could you just call our attention to it, please?
Right, 6B, 1, 2, and 3 are the budget items we're
Correct.
taking action on.
Excluding those.
8A, under ordinances, ordinance adoptions, 8A, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Resolutions, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 55.
Okay. So here's what I'd like to do with the indulgence of the council. Let's move through the resolutions, particularly the 9B articles, since these probably require less explanation. I'd ask that everyone take a moment, and let's look at page 9. This is 9B 41 through 9B 46. Are there any questions on 9B 41 through 9B 46? Anything on 9B 41? Anything on 9B 42? This is authorizing disposal of surplus bicycles through the propertyroom.com. Any questions on 42? Okay, on 43, this is rejecting bids for the DPW salt dome. Any comment on this for our consideration, Mrs. Schlegel?
No, the only thing is all the bids came in higher than anticipated, so we're back at the drawing board.
Okay, which is why it was rejected. Okay.
Yes.
9B 44, this is accepting a municipal alliance grant. Any questions on that? 9B 45, Mr. Filiatro, forgive me, tongue-tied. 9B 45, when in order chronologically should this be passed? Should this be done when we introduce the budget on 6B3? How is this going to work since?
No, the permanent budget will not be in effect until you have your July meeting public hearing on the budget. This is to carry us through to them on the temporary budget.
Okay.
And it's to provide enough appropriation. So that can be done along with resolutions. That's not really part of the permanent budget process.
Understood. And 9B 46, this is authorizing renewal of an alcoholic beverage license. We have the backup. And we also have 9B 55, authorizing the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement with Verizon, authorizing an agreement for the Howell PAL for the cell tower.
That's correct.
Is this finally coming to fruition with Declan O'Scanlan?
The zoning board is going to hold hearings on it.
Yeah.
It should be approved, I would assume.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, hearing no questions or comments, I'd ask for a motion, please, on Articles 9B 41, 42, 43, I'm sorry.
We'll just go into regular session first.
That's a very good idea. I need a motion, please, to go into regular session.
So moved, Mayor.
We need a second. We have a motion and a second. This is to go into regular. Any comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton? Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, I'd like a motion, please, to move Articles 9B 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, and 55.
Mr. Mayor, as a point
Yes,
of
ma'am.
order, I think we need to open to the public for comments. Isn't that what we usually do before we vote on anything? on
Appreciate the
consent?
reminder, you're right.
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. Okay, at this time, just to be clear, the council is only taking action on certain items tonight. The actions that we're going to talk about right now are resolutions. These are the 9B articles I just talked about. If anyone from the public has any questions or comments, at this point in time, we'll recognize you specific to Articles 9B 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, and 55. If you have questions on any other item, we will likely get to those in a separate hearing. Mrs. Smith, good evening, welcome. Just let us know when you get comfortable which particular item you'd like to talk about.
Pauline Smith, 54 Vanderveer Road, 9B 46. If you would just simply list the licenses that are being renewed.
Sure. Do you have...
That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Swolman, do you have them handy?
The liquor license?
Yes, ma'am.
It's posted on the board under the resolution. We have 25 liquor licenses.
Oh, there's 25 of them.
One of them will be renewed tonight. The remaining 4 will be renewed on June 24th.
There's a list right here. Would you like my list, ma'am?
I just think that it's appropriate for the public to hear. That's all.
Okay, hold on, we'll read them. That's a very fair
Well-
point. Do you have it handy?
Yeah, I'll read
Mr.
them.
Walsh, would you please?
Howell, number 2515, Lakewood Manicure, Inc., on 90 Lanes Mills Road, New Jersey Latvian Society, Inc., Adelphia 72, Applebee's, Scooter's Family Restaurant, Tom's Tavern, Ruby Tuesday, Ivy League, The Cabin, Howell Lanes, Chapter House, Our House Tavern, Fritzy's Restaurant, Carino's Italian Grill, Mulligan's, Hungry Quail, Eagle Oaks Golf Club, Longhorn Steakhouse, Spirits Unlimited, K Liquors, Italian Delights and Spirits, Wine on the Nine, Ramtown Wine and Liquors, and Byret.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Smith. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on those items I just mentioned? All right, seeing no one, we'll close the public portion on those articles, and I would ask a member of the council to please introduce a motion, again, specifically for 9B 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, and 55.
So moved, Mayor.
We have a motion, we need a second, please.
Second, Mayor.
Motion and a second, any comments or remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, at this time, we'll go to 6B, which is the 2008 municipal budget. 6B1 is a resolution. This is establishing the amount of deferred school taxes. Mr. Filiatro, by way of explanation, would you please speak to this article?
Yes, in the way that the regional school tax is assessed, it actually, the struck tax rate actually pre-taxes the people 6 months' worth of school taxes. One way to address this and to allow the people to have some benefit of that money rather than have it sit in our bank accounts for 6 months is allow the township to defer that school tax and use it to offset our costs, since it's in our coffers. So we are limited to 50% of the total amount of the school tax. We have traditionally, over the last several years, maintained that 50% full deferral, and are anticipating that money to be available for us to use in the local budget again this year. So this just increases the deferral back up to the full 50%. The dollar amount this year that we would be adding is about $536,700.
Okay, are there any questions or comments relative to establishing the amount of the deferred school tax bank? All right, hearing none, I'd like a motion, please, on 6B1 to approve.
So moved, Mayor.
We need a second, please.
Second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or remarks? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, 6B2, this is ordinance 00819, exceed municipal budget, establish cap bank. There was an introduction on June the 10th. Public hearing and adoption is scheduled for June the 24th. There is no need for any additional action this evening. Is that correct, Mr. Filiatro? Well, other than obviously an introduction, all we're going to do tonight is simply introduce. Okay.
As an explanation, this is the old appropriation cap. We do not need the extra 1% for 2.5 to 3.5 as far as our appropriations, but we do want that cap bank to allow that unused cap that we haven't used to carry forward 2 years in the event we need it in the next 2 years. So simply by adopting this resolution, we get to bank that cap for 2 more years.
I'm looking in our packet for the typical material. Member of the council have it ready? All right, I'd ask a member of the council to please proceed with the introduction of 6B2. You don't have it?
I don't know.
Does anyone? I don't believe it's in our packet.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Ms. Dalton, would you please?
I don't have it, Mr. Mayor.
You don't.
Oh. Okay.
Use that as a guide and replace its 00819, introduced tonight and adopted on the 24th.
I understand. I can read from the sample and just insert the number. But
It's in your book.
it is?
We have the backup,
Okay.
we just didn't have the cover sheet.
You just
Oh,
didn't have that.
all right, that's
Yeah,
why I
that's all.
didn't see it. Okay, no problem. Okay. Motion that ordinance number 0-08-19 be be introduced and passed on first reading. Wait. This is not. Wait, I can do it. Motion that ordinance number 0-08-19.
That's wrong.
You gave me the wrong paper. That's all right. Don't we have it? Where are the ordinances?
Page 3.
No. No language anywhere.
I looked back here. It's sitting there with mine.
And I don't have it committed to memory. All right.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Moving right along.
How is it that we just don't have this stuff in the book, but, okay.
We cannot do 6B3
We can't do 6B3 until we do 6B2.
until we do introduce the ordinance. So if you want to go on to
right
other
We're going to
things.
take a 2-minute recess. We'll come right back.
Why don't we just go to 7? Just go to the 7th.
Well, I guess we could at this point. Bob said.
I think because we want to get it done.
I have to tell you, it's just not acceptable. There's always something wrong with the books.
That's why we need to have it on a disc and everybody have a laptop.
I
The
don't.
laptops are sitting upstairs collecting dust. The brand new
Why?
one's in the box.
Why?
They're up there. Laptops are sitting up there in a box. We don't even need
Was
these.
there anything else that we were going to be introducing tonight?
No, that's it.
Yes, no, that's not true.
We were
We're
introducing
not
something else?
introducing anything else. We're adopting.
Everything else is workshop and public hearing.
Public, what about this one, 9A3?
9A3.
Personnel policies for certain positions.
No, that's being pulled.
Okay.
But it's not in the book?
What are you talking about, 9A3?
Page 5.
9A3 is off the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can use this.
We have the
Would
cover
Somebody
sheet.
tell Mr. Walsh, Mr. Nicastro, would you get Mr. Walsh to come in, please? Ms. Dalton?
Thank you. And is it on for public hearing June 24th? Yes, it is. June 24th.
Everything is right except that first number. We got one, Miss Woman. We pulled 9A3. We searched the book until we found one. But whatever you have is appropriate in case there's another mistake. It's not your fault. How is it your fault? Who's the official clerk of the town?
She puts the books together.
Hey, if a buck private makes a mistake, whose responsibility is it?
The privates.
It's the general.
No,
What's
it
that?
ain't. No, it's not.
One of my employees makes a mistake, my boss doesn't call the employee, he calls me.
Let me tell you something, in the Army, when the private makes a mistake, the private goes to jail, not the general.
All right, we're going to reconvene the meeting. Our apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Mrs. Dalton, would you please
Yes.
proceed on 6B2?
Motion to introduce ordinance number 0-08-19 on first reading by title and to order the same be published in full in the June 13, 2008 issue of the Asbury Park Press, together with notice of its introduction and passage on first reading by title, and that it will be further considered for final passage after public hearing at a meeting of the Township Council to be held on June 24, 2008 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time in the municipal building.
Okay, need a second, please.
Second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Woman, would you please call the roll?
Ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank, NJSA 40A:4-45.14. Roll call, Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, call the council's attention, and incidentally, by the way, we will obviously go back and workshop the balance of the resolutions, but in light of the importance of the budget, and I think Mr. Howell might have to leave at a certain hour, we need 4 people to get to the budget. 6B3, this is the resolution introducing the 2008 municipal budget Mr. Filiatro, why don't you walk us through the necessary logistics, please?
All right, you have before you on the dais a draft of the budget, which is missing, at this point, just missing the recorded vote from tonight. Tonight, this introduction starts the statutory 28-day period in which to make this budget public and to allow the public a chance to review it and to critique it. It doesn't become a operating budget now until our July 10th meeting. So this starts the process. The recorded vote will be entered. Copies of this will be available in the clerk's office tomorrow for any member of the public. It'll also be posted in the bulletin board, posted in the library. We will have advertisement in the newspaper. And as soon as I get an MIS director back, we will post it on the webpage so people can peruse it there. That will probably be early next week. So this starts the clock running for the public review of the budget. And we are slated to have a public hearing on the budget on July 10th.
That's correct.
Which is a special meeting on Thursday night. Depending on whether there are objectors or too many objectors to the feeling of the council, you may either choose to amend it that night or to pass the budget.
All right, well, since it is policy that before we act on a particular item, that we do have a public discussion, I'm going to open up this to the public for anyone who has a comment specifically on Article 6B3. If anyone has an article on 6B3, this is the resolution introducing the 2008 municipal budget. If anyone would like to be recognized on this item, please come forward. Yes, Mr. DiMatteo. Good evening, Mr. DiMatteo. If you just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Jeff DiMatteo, Howell Township First Aid Captain. Just wanted to know in the budget, is the first aid money still appropriated in the budget?
It is. Each squad is allocated the traditional $70,000.
Okay. Is there any intent on removing that money?
Certainly hope not.
Okay.
Budget's not passed yet.
Okay. That's all I wanted.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. DiMatteo. Is there anyone else who has any questions or comments relative to 6B3? Yes, in the back. Good evening, Mrs. Zito. Welcome. Come on up.
Marie Zito, 47 Cherry Bend Drive,
Good evening, Ms. Zito.
Township employee, union representative. I'd like to know, is the council still going to a $0 increase on this budget?
Ms. Zito, the budget as it has been prepared and ready to be introduced does qualify and call for a zero increase.
It does.
It does.
Okay. So with all the information that was given you, that with a $0 increase, this town will be $3 million in debt in December, doesn't affect your idea of changing that? And Mr. Filiatro can back me up on that.
Well, he can back you up on what?
That if you go to a $0 increase with the 2008 budget, you will be putting this town in $3 million in the hole come 2009.
Mr. Filiatro, since apparently you and Ms. Zito have met, can you
No, I haven't.
elaborate?
I've had no
on
meetings
these
with Ms.
I have
Zito.
not had any meetings with Mr. Filiatro.
I had no meetings with Ms. Zito, and I'm not sure where the $3 million figure came from. I know we have talked about a number of projections over, the budget process, over, the potential that we have on next year's budget, but I don't recall it ever being $3 million.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zito. Anyone else who'd like to be recognized on 6B3? Yes, sir. Come on up. Good evening, Mr. Coffey.
How you doing, Mayor?
Nice to see you.
Is this on? Ken Coffey, Hampton Road. In reference to that First Aid Squad appropriation, and the budget is going to be available tomorrow for us to look at, is that correct?
Yes, it will.
But it won't be on the internet. Did it just
No,
say
it'll
it
be
will not?
available, Mr. Coffey, it'll be available in the clerk's office tomorrow, and it probably will not be on the
Copies?
website until
Can I get a
next
copy?
week. Certainly.
Will those monies be a line item in the budget that we can see, or is it hidden in the
No, it's a
another
separate line
number.
item. It is a
Okay.
separate line item.
And if anything happens to that between tomorrow and July the 10th, when we're going to talk about it, how will we know?
It's not possible.
Nothing
What?
can happen until July
From
10th,
a-
and that would be done by resolution.
From a parliamentary perspective, whatever gets adopted tonight,
Introduced tonight.
excuse me, thank you, whatever is introduced tonight, thank you, is going to be advertised in the newspaper exactly as
Right.
it will be passed tonight. And then nothing changes really between now and the final hearing, so that the public has an opportunity to review the records and be prepared to come on the 24th and have a conversation about what has been introduced.
Okay.
July
so-
10th, Mayor, I'm sorry.
July the 10th.
All right, so on the 10th, I assume that the council will present any changes made to that which we get tomorrow.
On the 10th would be the evening upon which there could be additional amendments proposed to the budget. If the amendments are
That
substantive,
occur between tomorrow and the 10th?
Nothing will occur between tomorrow and the 10th.
Okay,
once the budget gets introduced tonight, if it is in fact introduced,
Okay.
everything is frozen exactly as it is.
Okay.
Between now and the 10th of July, so that the public can examine the records.
okay, so we're not going to see anything slip by us
If
between
we
now and the 10th?
change it,
Yes.
we must change it
On the
from
10th.
up here.
On the 10th?
Yeah, it cannot be changed.
Not between now and the 10th, but the 10th?
That's it.
That's correct.
Okay, very
That's
good.
correct. And on the 10th, from a procedural perspective, if in the judgment of our council, the changes were substantive enough,
Okay.
that it changed the outcome of the budget so materially, it would require us to republish, reintroduce, and go through the process again. Because a substantive change to an ordinance would require further publication in the newspaper and so on.
Okay,
But to Mr. Walsh's point, anything that happens has to happen here in an open public session.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coffey. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on 6B3? Okay, we're going to close the public portion on 6B3. I would ask a member of the council to...
I
Please
just
make-
would like to read...
go right ahead.
If you will. I am on page 2, which is actually about the third page down. And I would just like to read into the record the resolution. It's only a few short lines.
Go right ahead, sir, please.
Municipal budget of the Township of Howell, County of Monmouth for the fiscal year 2008. Be it resolved that the following statements of revenues and appropriations shall constitute the municipal budget for the year 2008. Be it further resolved, the said budget to be published in the Asbury Park Press in the issue of June 13, 2008. The governing body of the Township of Howell does hereby approve the following as the budget for the year 2008.
Okay, at this point, we need a motion to introduce, please.
Motion to introduce the budget, Mayor.
We have a
Second.
motion, and we have a second. Are there any comments or remarks?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I
Go
just
right
want to reemphasize, we had a lot of very productive budget hearings over the spring this year that I thought were wonderfully done. Our township employees, the managers, Mrs. Schlegel, all put in a lot of effort. We put in a lot of effort to get this accomplished. I encourage the public to read the budget, read it carefully. I especially encourage the public to understand that though we could have raised almost an additional $1 million via tax levy, I think it was $1 million, am I right about that, Mr. Filatrio? Yes. $1 million we could have raised by additional tax levy. We did not. We opted to tighten belts, make some difficult decisions, to do the will of the people and stop the bleeding of taxes, at least the part that we have some control over. Your taxes are still going to go up, not the municipal part, but your school taxes are going to go up, your county taxes are going to go up. We can't...
County zero.
County's
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, county did it too. But the school taxes, the people spoke. Even though the people didn't want taxes to go up, the people spoke and the people increased the school board budget. So your taxes are going to go up. Just want people to know that. I think this is a responsible budget. I think we're doing the responsible thing for the people. And for those reasons, I'm certainly going to vote to approve it.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Walsh?
Good, Mayor. We spent many, many hours going over the budget and speaking to department heads, hearing from citizens, and it's not an easy process. You know, I own a company, and I've watched over the last 3 years as my company has declined in revenue, as the mortgage industry has fallen apart, the real estate industry has fallen apart. A lot of tough decisions have to be made, some of them on a daily basis, and some of them are gut-wrenching. This much I do know. Most people are having a hard time surviving right now. So for me, the number one thing that I have in my heart when I make my decision is what is the best decision to be made overall for all the people of Howell Township. Doesn't mean I like the decision I'm making or I'm happy with the decision I'm making. But a decision has to be made, and that's what I was elected to do. I've often said that what do you do when you have two bad decisions? That's what makes a leader. Somebody who will make a decision, even though there's not a good decision to be made. Some of the decisions that I've talked about during these budget hearings, in my eyes, they're not good decisions. They're responsible decisions. Decisions that had to be made. Next year, I believe, Mr. Filiaccio, no matter what, we're behind the 8 ball, no matter what we did this year.
We will be beyond the 8 ball no matter what you did this year, absolutely.
Okay?
Even if we raise that $1 million in additional taxes on the backs of the people?
Even if you raise that $1 million, we would be less of a hole, but we would still be in a hole.
I mean, I've had some tough decisions in the last couple of years. I've had to lay off single mothers that have been with me 8 and 10 years. You know, it was personal and not just business, but at the end, you know, decisions have to be made. And I would like to hear from everybody or when they speak. I would love for everybody to get to their heart what's best for all of Howell. Not just this group, that group, my backyard. What is best for all of Howell Township? I mean, I try to sit back and reflect, and I'll go in my backyard and say, what's the best decision to be made for all the people of Howell Township? Sometimes they'll negatively affect what's in my backyard, and I'm okay with that, as long as it was the best decision to be made for all the people of Howell. And I sure wish everybody would work towards getting that in their heart, because we're going to have many more tough decisions ahead of us in future years. There's going to be less and less money coming from the state. There's going to be more and more taxes coming at us from different angles, more and more fees being charged, and it's what we're faced with. I mean, to keep on doing things the same and expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity. We can't keep on going on this way. I mean, all the decisions were in mine. One of the decisions that I had a major part in was the dollar amount and the percentage increase. A lot of things were done with the department heads and the manager. I think they did a great job. And they just don't think that they sat back and said, oh yeah, well, let's have fun and we'll cut this and cut that. They had to make a lot of tough decisions that negatively affected their own departments. So I pray that everyone, you know, just does the best they can during these tough economic times, because it's being felt all over the place. It's not just in Howell Township. It's all over the United States. There's rough times in this country right now. So God be with everybody. And the budget is what, and I did agree with the 0% hike. I don't want nobody to think that I didn't agree with a 0% hike, because I did. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Since we're going around, Mr. Howell, do you have any comments? Nothing. I want to echo what Mrs. Dalton and Mr. Howell said. I'll make my remarks very briefly. I've sat through, I guess this is my 6th budget. I think the most important thing we have to do is be conscious of the economic issues that we're facing at the time. The country is in a depression. Gasoline is $4 a gallon. Every major pharmaceutical company, long immune from economic difficulties, are laying off employees. We know what's happening with General Motors and Ford and the big companies that make the American economy work, and they're not working right now. And all of this has a detrimental impact on what happens right here in our own community. People are losing their homes. They're unable to pay their mortgages. These people call me. They call me at home. They email me. People are hurting at every turn, and we have to do what is responsible in light of whatever the downstream consequences may be to contend with the issues we're faced with right now. And right now, the climate in the community is that we cannot afford additional tax increases. And so I'm pleased that we've adopted this budget, albeit it is a painful one. There are reductions in workforce, and that's not something anybody up here, no matter what the council is, no matter their political affiliation, ever wants to have to be involved in. But we are empowered to be the leaders of the community, and we are empowered to make the necessary decisions that will influence the nearly 55,000 people that live here. And we have to do what is in the best interest of a majority of them, not just some of them, but as many of them as we possibly can help. And no matter what decision we made, what's going to happen in next year's budget is not going to be favorable regardless. And so people have said, well, I won't be in office, it won't be my problem. Well, I live here, and I'm going to continue to live here. And so it's all of our problem. It's a community problem. So what we have to do is we have to rally together and find ways to fix these issues together and not have disagreement about whose ox is being gored and why wasn't this money in my budget and why was this taken out of this line item. Believe me when I tell you, this is a homogeneous mixture of a bunch of ideas, and none of them is perfect. But what we've come up with is a spending plan that is responsible, that is conscious of the time that we are living in, and hopefully demonstrates to the people of this community we can hold the line. So as we proceed through the hearings and all the deliberations that I expect will come from the public, I want everyone to recognize we're all on the same team here. There is no right answer. There is no perfect way to resolve the problems that we face, and we are not alone. The 600 or however many municipalities they are, every mayor I talk to, every council person we see, this is a statewide crisis that we're in. So let's work together to get through it, and I think if we stick together as a community and we keep it nonpartisan and we keep it about what's best for the town, we'll get through this crisis like this town has gotten through many before and many that will come after all of our times. I do want to acknowledge the efforts of Mr. Filiatro and notably Mrs. Schlegel. They had to navigate through a number of complexities, 5 different people, 5 different ideas, a lot of healthy debate, a lot of disagreement, and they always managed to keep the process moving in what I thought was an exceptionally well done, very professionally oriented process. On behalf of the council, our kudos to the 2 of you and all of your respective department heads for helping shepherd this. It was a team effort, and while we're certainly not done yet, I feel we've accomplished a great deal in getting to where we are tonight. Are there any other comments from the council? Okay, hearing none. We do have a motion. We do have a second. Roll call, please, on 6B3.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, at this time, council's pleasure. We can go to the 7A discussion items, or we can go and finish up the workshop on the balance of the resolution items. Mr. Howell, you want to go to 7?
Yeah, let's do
Okay,
7.
that's fine. I know you have a time schedule. All right, discussion items. Call the council's attention to 7A. 7A1 is a discussion with respect to fees for website advertising and sponsorship fees for Howell Township Cable Television. We're to discuss a proposed ordinance, proposed fees for our website, and sponsorship on the cable access channel. Mrs. Schlegel, would you please tee up this discussion for our consideration?
Yes, Mayor. One of the things we're trying to do, as you well know, is to increase some of the revenue, and the fact that we are allowed to advertise on our website and also on our television can have a sponsorship. So in your packet, you had some suggestions and recommendations from our MIS director, Mr. Banowski, regarding some fees.
Bless you.
For advertising on the website and sponsorship on Howell TV. So what we would like to do is discuss proposing an ordinance using those fees. I don't know if you've had an opportunity. The website would be $500 per month per advertiser. The council meetings would be $400 monthly for exclusive sponsorship. Planning board would be $150, zoning $150, and the bulletin board would be $300 per month run on every bulletin board presentation for that month.
Good.
Okay, comments, questions from the council. Mrs. Dalton?
Mrs. Schlegel, Can you just clarify the difference, the real difference between what would a sponsorship consist of versus what would advertising? In other words, does it say Zager Fuchs, PC, official sponsor of the Howell Township Council meetings?
Right, it's just that with respect to television, legally, it could be only a sponsorship. It can't be considered, it can't be like we won't be having a commercial.
Very similar to PBS.
Okay, so funding for this program brought to you through the generous grant from XYZ Foundation.
Exactly.
That's correct.
But what about standards for who gets to advertise and who doesn't?
Yeah, echoing that
That's-
sentiment, I don't mean to be facetious. My biggest concern is this evening's council meeting is brought to you by the XXX so-and-so shop on Route 9. And that may seem to some to be out of the question, but I'm concerned about that. And I think we want to maintain a certain amount of regulatory control.
I think that's a legal issue.
Where's our attorney?
But what we're discussing here is establishing a fee.
Right.
Certainly, we do have some rules already in place, and certainly they would have to be reviewed, and we would make sure that we do have tasteful rules in place and rules that council wants. The discussion tonight really is, do we want to establish a fee? We do have some interest. We have had some contacts of people who would like to get involved in the PEG station, and therefore, there already is a call for this.
Is the exclusive sponsorship, is that one sponsor for the council meeting? Somebody picks up
Yes.
the council sponsor at $400 a month, that's it? They're the only sponsor
That's
of the council
correct.
meetings?
That's correct.
Okay. But I don't know, Mr. Filatrio, you say we have standards for
We do have,
being the direction.
Yeah, we do have a rules and regulations book, if you will, that the TV committee has established. There is a organization that we belong to that we did borrow from some of their rules and regulations, and there are things in place. We certainly would have that reviewed, and before we actually instituted this and made this in place, make sure we do have these rules
We
in
have a
place.
broadcast media advisory committee who is active, and what we would do is absolutely, as Mr. Filiatro said, is we would have to review the parameters.
Well, it sounds like the first actionable takeaway item, apart from the fees, is a review of our policies and procedures so that we have the autonomy to control who can and who cannot advertise.
We'll put something together
Okay.
and make sure that the council gets
Okay.
that for their input.
You have something, Mr. Bongiorno?
There isn't that many,
Ernie, is your mic on, or are you turning it off?
turning it on. There isn't that many, I know what you're concerned about, like freedom of speech. When it comes to commercial speech, the council, it would be basically the same as another advertiser. Just because you're the council doesn't mean that you're limiting freedom of speech, when you choose among advertisers.
Okay. All right, well, you'll look into
Yes, sir.
what our policy controls are. Mr. Walsh, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just like to,
I'll get to you
I would like a quarterly report about this, because I do understand these fees are suggested, and I would assume that they've done some research
That's correct.
when they've came up with those fees, so that I'm okay with. But I would like to know how we're doing on a quarterly basis, so I can get a feel out there from different businesses and how, whether or not they'd be more interested if it was less expensive, or is there a big flood of, I've already introduced somebody to you and brought you a tape of somebody that was very interested, and they had asked about it. But I would like a report on this to see how
But-
we're doing with it.
I don't know what you mean, because now we're not charging.
Well, I think Mr. Walsh's
Revenue.
point is, once we operationalize it,
Once it starts up.
we're going to want a
absolutely.
management report to review.
Absolutely, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Once it's
Certainly.
passed.
Absolutely, I just absolutely wanted to put it on the record that I'd like a report every quarter,
Gotcha.
okay?
Mr. Howell, you had a comment, sir?
Mrs. Slagle, just to try to put it simple, we'll have the same ability that, say, Howell North Little League has to decide who gets to put a billboard in the outfield.
That's
Right,
correct.
we won't be required to let anybody who wants to advertise, or sponsor.
Absolutely not.
Sponsor,
That's
so
why what we'll
puts it in
do
simplest
is,
terms.
we'll
Good.
give the mayor, and we'll provide mayor and council with the parameters for your input, and then until we finalize everything and move forward on that.
Okay.
That you feel comfortable with what the parameters are.
The only observations that I had were, did we check with perhaps the League of Municipalities, best practices around what a majority of municipalities might charge? And did we, looks like we got this from Washington Township and Gloucester. Did this come from a number of different communities, and this was sort of the median average of what towns charged, or?
We belong to an organization of a number of towns that have these PEG channels. And we did take about the average of what towns that are up and running and are charging sponsorships, and we did use that as a basis.
So this baseline has some merit in that. Other communities, there's some consistency. The only other issue that I might recommend to the council is that we ask the Chamber of Commerce from our community to perhaps give us some input. Perhaps we can share this with them on an informal basis to the commissioners of the chamber for their review and consideration. It hopefully would build some interest in the chamber. And the other issue is we want to invite more feedback from local communities, businesses that is. So I'd like to recommend we circulate something to the chamber.
I can do that through my office.
I mean, but that's up to the council.
I'm fine with the mayor.
All right, so if we do that, what are the appropriate next steps? Are we comfortable enough that we're ready to see an ordinance, or do we want to see a draft of an ordinance first?
I think so. I think
Well,
it's right.
what we need to do is, we're looking for a fee ordinance. That's really what all we're talking about right now, is
Okay.
because we need an ordinance to establish fees.
Why don't we do this as the takeaways, and unless the council disagrees. The first is you'll circulate to us in writing that we do have, pursuant to Mr. Howell's point, the ability to control who can and who can't advertise.
Right.
And number two, we can circulate it to the chamber for any feedback. And then number three, a draft, not ready for introduction, but a draft of this fee ordinance so we can all get a look at it again. Everyone agreement with that?
I'm fine, mayor.
Okay. 782, LoSAP provider. In fact, I see we have a number of members of one of the first aid squads here. I was told it was in relation to 782. Apparently, we're going to consider a proposed resolution to appoint Lincoln National Life as the LoSAP provider.
Oh, Mayor, this is on for discussion only. That's why it's on for discussion. Mr. Filiatro can elaborate a little longer. Before we can do anything, like I said, this is for discussion, and if that's the direction that the council would like to move in after listening to Mr. Filiatro, then according to ordinance, we would have to meet with the LoSAP committee on the first aids prior to passing an ordinance. I mean, a resolution, I'm sorry.
All right, so, Mr. Filiatro, why don't you tell us what's happening with this?
Yeah, I think you remember that a couple of meetings ago, we had a first aider here, and the LoSAP contribution had not gone into the accounts for the 2007 earned period that normally we would put in by January 30th of this year. We had a report from the auditor that a mistake had been made in past years. He was concerned over this would render, there was slightly too much money put into the accounts in '04 and '05. This may render the plan not tax exempt, which would have tax consequences to the members and everything. And we asked VALIC to calculate the correction. They would have to calculate the excess contribution and all the excess earnings that contribution made, and certainly made sense to adjust it in this year's payment, which was their suggestion. Made sense to me. We are now at June 10th. I've yet to get that calculation from VALIC. I've yet to get a phone call from them to give me an idea when that calculation is going to be done. And the first aiders haven't had their LoSAP contribution made, and I think that's unfair to them. And it's really a service thing. There are only two really valid providers in New Jersey. There are two other approved that, one's under indictment for stealing the money, and the other one's not accepting new customers. So
Why don't we look at that first one?
Is Met still in this business, or are they not in this business?
They're not approved in this. There's only 4 companies approved in the state of New Jersey for this, And as I say, 2 of them are really, I'm not even going to consider. One won't even consider us.
Okay.
The other one with the owner and under, an indictment for possibly stealing money from members' accounts, I don't know if we want to get involved in that one.
That the one we have to talk through the glass, each guy gets a phone?
Yeah, that's the one. So the Lincoln's the only other one. Lincoln services about 90% of the LoSAP accounts in New Jersey. So, I'm not very happy with the service I'm getting from VALIC, and I wanted to start this conversation. If council is in agreement, I would like to start this conversation with the LoSAP committee and the first aid squads and get their feelings on it, and if they agree with me, take the steps necessary to move it over.
You had a question, Mr. Walsh?
Do you have written correspondence that you've sent to them?
Yes, I do. The latest, the earliest one was, I think it was reviewing the file today of February.
Can I have copies of that correspondence?
Sure.
In my package, please, Ms. Schlegel?
Absolutely.
I'd like to recommend for the council's consideration to direct Mr. Filiatro to do this is to write a letter to the Commissioner of Banking and Insurance in the state of New Jersey officially documenting our concerns with respect to AIG VALIC's performance or lack thereof, and read into the record our concerns and asking for their indulgence and involvement in making certain that the corrections are made and that any of our LoSAP participants are indemnified and made whole in the event that there's any problems or difficulties. And I think that's something that we absolutely want to do, and let's take advantage of the fact that we do have the Department of Banking and Insurance, and we should make them aware of that. It might also be appropriate to copy the Department of Community Affairs on that as well, since I know that they're involved in helping other towns prepare LoSAP, and if this is a track record problem with AIG, perhaps we want to make certain that Mr. Doria's office is aware of it as well. And then on the surface, provided that we can be assured that all of the appropriate features, mechanisms, ease of looking up account balances and what have you, all of what I would call the administrative delivery features are equal to or better than, from a service point of view, and that all the funds will be transferred and everyone will get a new balance, and this can be implemented without any concern for our LoSAP participants, we should explore making the right change. And I'm not sure what needs to happen to enact that after the LoSAP committee reviews it. Has there been any discussion with LoSAP committee members about this?
Not as yet. No, we wanted the opinion of the council first. The processing will involve you doing a resolution to actually change the vendor. So we wanted your opinion first. So certainly, if the council was not, of the opinion to consider this, we wouldn't go any further. But now we will have our meetings with if everybody's in agreement, we'll have our meetings with LoSAP committee and the first aid squads and get their input.
Mr. Filiatro, do we have any issue with respect to bidding requirements where we would have to solicit an RFQ or an RFP perhaps from other firms, or do we have the unilateral ability to just move this to this other vendor you recommend?
There actually is no cost to the township, and therefore there's no statutory requirement to RFP or RFQ. Also based on the availability of companies, we have no one else to talk to but Lincoln at this point in time, or to stay with VALIC. So.
Ms. Dalton, you had a question?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I know that we've talked about the LoSAP issue a few times over the last couple of months, and in all candor, were I not a member of the council, I wouldn't know what LoSAP is, and I am, always the one who is concerned that sometimes we need to explain it to the public. So can I get a 20-second synopsis of what it is for the benefit of those in the audience and out on TV who don't know what it is and what it is that we do for the volunteers of our community?
Sure, certainly. LoSAP stands for Length of Service Awards Program. And in layman's term, it basically is that each year we fund the equivalent of an IRA for those first aid members that achieve a point system. They attend a certain number of training programs, certain number of meetings, they respond to a certain number of calls, and if they achieve the minimum point value, then we fund basically what looks very much like an IRA. that is tax deferred to them until such point in time as they do retire, and it's something for them to draw on to help them in their retirement time.
And we, Mrs. Dalton, an important point, Mrs. Dalton, is that we put this on the referendum in November 2003, and it was overwhelmingly approved by the voters of the community to implement this program. It was required to be implemented by voter approval.
Mayor, this just pertains to first aid squads?
It does just pertain for first aid squads. It does apply also to fire districts, but since they are in a what am I looking for?
Separate fire districts.
Fire districts. The district would control and handle any LoSAP that they may or may not have for the firemen.
All right, so this paperwork that we have, and the reason I asked is just on page 1, it says that whereas the Township of Howell deems it appropriate to act to ensure retention of existing members and to provide incentives for recruiting new volunteer firefighters or first aid organization members. And then 2 paragraphs down, it says, whereas certain tax benefits could accrue to eligible volunteer firefighter organization members, it leaves out the first aid. So in one, it encompasses both, and then in the other one, it kicks out the one that it's supposed to be there for.
That is a boilerplate resolution provided by the state of New Jersey as firefighters or other volunteers is what they talk to, and we are the or.
So you'll get us an appropriately formatted resolution. This was more of an illustration.
That was a sample that was provided to me.
I mean, that, I think, is assuming that we are in agreement after
That's right.
review by the
LoSAP committee.
You're right, the LoSAP committee. I just wanted to clarify something, though, Mr. Filatro. You said that there's no cost to the township, and I think by that you meant there's no cost as far as a fee that gets paid to the institution, but we are paying. There is a cost,
we are
right.
funding the actual LoSAP contribution. The profit, if you were, the money that the company makes is a fee they assess the individual accounts.
Mr. Filiato, just what was the ballpark figure that was paid into LoSAP for 2007?
Should be sitting in the account if we paid it, right?
We haven't paid it yet. It hasn't
All right, what was
calculated.
the last one we paid?
The 2006 was $40-something thousand for all the memory.
Where's
Money well spent.
2007's money?
I have it in the bank account. I'm waiting for the calculation.
All right, so it appears as if we are in agreement that we want to file a legitimate complaint with the Department of Banking and Insurance, and it appears as if we're comfortable with Mr. Filiatro discussing this with the appropriate parties that operate mechanically the LoSAP program. Everyone in agreement?
No problem.
You'll report back to us after you meet with LoSAP?
Yes.
Okay. Since we did have members of the first aid squad here, is there anyone that had any comments that we missed on this? Anything we've missed? No?
No, the only
Good.
thing is I would have hoped that you would have come to us, it's a simple Excel sheet to calculate the base amount that was wrong, and I'm not sure that Ballot issues an invoice or the finance office receives every year a...
Excuse me, Mayor, can we just ask Ms. Weitengruber to come up to the microphone?
Why don't you come on up, Mrs. Weitengruber, and just give us a brief statement what you were going to say. Introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that it gets on the...
Of course.
on the
Record.
tape.
You need my name.
Please.
Suzanne Weitengruber, 25 Princeton Drive, and yes, I chaired the LoSAP committee. And the other members were Ron Sanisek, Jeff DiMatteo, Bob Kelly from the Ramtown Fire Department, and Harvey Morrell. Every year, the Division of Local Government Services puts forth a notice, a local finance notice, stating what the amount is if this plan has been in existence since, I believe, 1999. And they also give you the CPIs to increase that amount if you haven't been in by 1999. In terms of what was given to VALIC, and I don't believe VALIC gave us an invoice, I believe we generate a payment. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we generate a payment because the way it works is that all the first aid squads have to forward by January 15th, so you'll have ample time to include in your budget the people who have achieved their points, their 100 points in the prior year, or in the case of life members or college students, they get a lower point amount. They get, I believe, half payment for 60 points. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what it is. And the township, then forwards that list with the Social Security numbers to VALIC with the payment. So it wasn't VALIC who made the mistake. The township obviously picked up the wrong number somewhere along the line. There's a lot of numbers on that sheet. It's really a simple Excel sheet to pick up the numbers and know what the base difference was. How you're going to calculate what was made off of that base, because we're really only talking, I think the most was $111 one year. So how much you're going to calculate off of that base of $111 that they made, we're probably talking about dollars, cents. We might even be talking about losses if anyone's looked at their 401k in the last 2 years, right? So if there's a loss, I don't know how you're going to deal with it. My suggestion would be the simplest thing, and I have spoken to some people from VALIC, and they, of course, have a different story, and I'm sure the agreement can be reached somewhere in the middle. Quite frankly, I could probably give you an Excel sheet tomorrow telling you what the difference in the base is. And I really think that's where you need to go ahead. A lot of thought was put into who the provider would be, and the township did pass a resolution. The wording in the enabling ordinance that the township passed, the council passed, and that the people of the town approved by referendum said it did have to come back to the original committee, because this was a fear of the original committee, as well as the first aid squads before it was changed. Now, if you read it, they really don't have veto power, but I think there's some concern, because I know I've gotten calls from the first aid department asking what has gone on, and I have forwarded my concern back in March that this hadn't been funded. And if all that was is that we were going to change, well, that should have been, discussion should have been brought up in March. And quite frankly, I will be happy to call the members of the LoSAP committee together within the week. I have no problem. It's an advisory committee, so it doesn't need official notice, but we'll keep you all in the loop. And actually call up my contacts in VALIC. I will forward to Mrs. Schlegel that base amount, because that's all it is the base amount. I don't know how you're going to calculate how much each person gained or lost on that base amount. And we're not talking thousands of dollars for each individual. We're talking probably $111 in the 1 year, and roughly the similar amount.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're going to have a meeting with the committee, and so we'll certainly work through those details. Thank you for your comment, Mrs. Weitengruber. Okay, moving along, we have 7A3. This is a conversation I think can be a very quick one related to Clayton Avenue, and it appears, Mrs. Schlegel, that there was some conversation that this was a one-way, then it was changed. Can you clarify for us what your recommendation is and what we need to do?
And actually, the recommendation is to go to a one-way street. And actually, if you have any questions, Officer Brooks is here to...
Just, Mayor, if I
Under
could.
discussion, go right
I
ahead.
read this. I guess in the beginning it was a two-way street.
That's correct.
Then it was changed to a southbound one-way. And then it was advertised as a northbound one-way. And then, for some unknown reason, it became a two-way street all over again.
All right.
So right now, the only way you can go up and down this road is sideways.
So the recommendation, so we can act on this expeditiously, is that, and good evening, officer.
Good evening, sir.
The recommendation is that this be
a one-way
street. Okay.
Right.
So what do you need us to do in order to resolve this right now?
Just
give you direction?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anyone from the council who has a problem or a concern with this being officially redesignated as a one-way? Any problems or concerns?
No, sir. My only question or concern to you is, which way do you want it to be?
I think we would defer to your, from a serious perspective, we appreciate your being here. What is your department's recommendation from a health and safety and welfare perspective?
One word answer, south or north?
Originally, we wanted north. From what I read from the file, I'm Officer Scott Brooks from the Howell
Yes,
Police
I'm sorry,
Traffic
officer.
Safety.
Thank you.
According to our files, originally the ordinance was to be north. The ordinance, it was approved by DOT for it to be a one-way north. Looking through the file, at some point the council rescinded the north and then turned around and asked for a south.
When did that happen?
It all happened apparently in 2001.
2001.
Oh,
2001.
Thank goodness.
Well,
This all happened between the middle of 2002, between the middle of 2000 and the end of 2002. Originally, the road was north. The council rescinded the ordinance and then asked to go south. State DOT was contacted, and they have to have a final say before any ordinance we put through regarding roadways is to be approved. According to a letter I have from DOT on February 27 of 2002, they deny us for going southbound. Because nothing, in their letter, they say nothing has changed from our original request for it to be northbound.
Okay.
So DOT essentially is saying you can't make it southbound. Now, we originally made it northbound, and then it was rescinded.
All right, so the recommendation from your office is northbound, one way.
That was
Okay.
our original recommendation from 2001 by Corporal Fiore, who is now retired.
Makes sense to me.
And I
any other
did speak to the
concerns?
chief, I did speak personally to the chief, and he is in concurrence.
So you'll prepare the necessary material for introduction, and we'll move ahead.
Hold on, Mayor.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Now, this road runs parallel to 524, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Now, doesn't 524 run east to west?
It runs...
Perpendicular.
It starts,
Perpendicular.
if you're going north on Wyckoff Mills, it goes to the right past the post office, then makes a hard left and intersects with 524, which runs east and
So
west.
it's going to be north and east?
That's correct.
It's north.
East-
DOT said-
east-
And are we
first
going back
and
to
then
the only
north.
parking on one side of the street?
That's correct. We want parking on one side of the street.
Okay, so now we're going...
It's
we're
north,
gonna have-
Sergeant Rock.
All right, so we're north, we're good on this. Mrs. Schlegel, you have your direction?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, officer, appreciate you
sir.
coming out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, 7A4 is a discussion to potentially create an ordinance that would ban smoking in any township park. Mrs. Schlegel, why don't you give us the update?
Yes, Mayor.
Discussion point on this?
The deputy mayor, the deputy...
Can I ask you for 1 second?
Sure.
I know that we've got members of the First Aid Squad here. Is there any other reason for their benefit? Are we talking anything else tonight that is First Aid Squad related?
You never know. I'm only kidding.
I all imagine they have better things they may like to do. You're all, of course, welcome to stay, but I'm sure, so there's nothing else tonight that's going to come up for First Aid?
I do have one thing. I believe Councilwoman Schumacher was supposed to meet with them, with Councilwoman Dalton in a meeting.
That's
Yes, tomorrow.
3:30.
Okay. And Councilwoman Schumacher is not going to be able to make that meeting. I would like the permission from the council to go to it.
Fine with me.
I
I'll be in Dallas. You do whatever you want.
It's fine with me.
I just wanted to...
Yeah, that's
fine
fine.
with me.
I personally can't be there, so.
Okay.
All right, so your meeting is tomorrow. So nothing else for the First Aid Squad tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, you're always welcome. It's always good to see you guys. But you're welcome to stay, but in the event you have more pressing business, we appreciate that. Okay. Thank you very much, folks. All right, 7A4. We're back to this. Mrs. Schlegel, go right ahead.
The deputy mayor asked that this be put on for discussion, so I'm going to let him...
You got it. Mr. Howell.
Mayor, as Mrs. Schlegel stated, I had made a phone call to her after attending a girls' softball game and watching the parents sitting behind the dugout smoking, which it just annoys the hell out of me. First off, they're on Board of Ed property, and they're not supposed to be smoking on Board of Ed property, but then you think back to even Howell Day, when we used to have fireworks, or the 4th of July when we used to have fireworks.
We did
And-
this
Still
year.
do.
I'm busting your chops. And I'm sure,
Fireworks here every other Tuesday.
I'm sure the Parks and Rec guys get tired of finding cigarette butts all over the place. But with Bonham potentially opening this year, I'd like to not just have it at parks where there are youth sporting events. I'd like to make the township parks and the township properties no smoking areas, like north, south, central, the Pop Warner Field. No need for adults to be smoking around where kids are gathering.
Mr. Bongiovanni, I think it's a great idea. Is there
I mean,
anything that
they
restricts
do it
us?
at Giant Stadium, they do it at, you know.
The public's ability to limit smoking in public places is almost unlimited constitutionally, so...
It's almost,
Unlimited constitutionally.
so we can prohibit smoking on our,
On public property.
on public property, we can.
Yes.
All right. Is it the pleasure of the council to direct Mrs. Schlegel to have the Recreation Department to look at this and putting some requirements and regulations together? We're not in favor of this. What's the pleasure of the council? Mrs. Dalton, we'll start with you.
I don't have an objection to it.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
I have no objection to it.
And I certainly don't either. So would your office prepare the
We will.
appropriate materials for our consideration? All right, 7A5, I think I had asked for this one to be put on. It was to discuss an appropriate passive recreational use for Bear Swamp, walking trails, campgrounds, et cetera. As many in the community know, we now officially, which is pretty historic in my judgment, we started 6 years ago, January 1st of 2003, to try and get all those deed issues resolved, and at the last council meeting, we finally did. So now that it is officially in our possession, we wanted to talk about, the council wanted to talk about the appropriate, strictly passive uses for Bear Swamp and how it can be opened up for further usage in the community. And Mrs. Schlegel, if you want to add anything to that, we do know, I went on a tour of the property with you, in fact.
Right.
I guess it's maybe 18 months ago, and we saw that there was campground capabilities. There's a number of real neat features that come along with Bear Swamp. So what's your discussion point on this for us?
Well, with regards to Bear Swamp, we had discussed, as you're aware from the very beginning, that it would be used for passive recreation. Presently, to get into the back part, we have an issue with that roadway, as you well know.
Van Schuck Bridge.
Right.
Mr. Nunziato tells us is not a problem anymore, right? It's been fixed, hasn't it?
The crossing has been repaired, however, there's a...
Yeah, who owns it?
There's a
An
half and
ownership issue,
half.
correct.
Right, there's an issue of ownership, so that of course still needs to be worked out. But I think that as I said, the original intent was to use it for passive recreation. So we would need to look at, I think maybe, there were some people that were very involved in this, and, we probably should have the Recreation Department, along with some of the citizens, to really look at what would be benefit, put something together, and then come back to council. But you're absolutely correct. You had seen a couple of areas that seemed conducive to maybe camping, tent camping, that
Right.
type of thing only. And there's some work that needs to be done, obviously, on the trails. So those are things we'd have to look at.
My personal recommendation to the council would be twofold. The first is we need to resolve this Van Schuik Bridge access issue. And I think Mr. Bongiovanni may have been involved with this a while back. Did you represent him or something?
Mr. Van Scoik had some sort of a minor subdivision. Actually, it wasn't even a minor subdivision. It was a subdivision under the special law that deals with family divisions of like
So you know him.
property. So I know him. And I was just talking to Mr. Nunziato to see if there's some way I could find out what's going on within the bounds of the fact that I've represented him before.
Well, my first recommendation to the council, if you're not familiar with the Van Schuik Bridge, it's a critical access way to get into the rear area of Bear Swamp. And the concern we have is if we truly open this up to other folks, and it is only for passive horseback riding, walking, bird watching, what have you, but if we don't have access to that bridge, if Mr. Van Schuik decided there's just too many campers, walking with their backpacks and shuts it down, well, then that's a problem for us. And this has been an ongoing issue
Years.
that I've been after Mr. Davis, Mr. Janetsky, now we're after Mrs. Schlegel. I think we have to come to some resolution, and if the council agrees, perhaps we can ask you, Mr. Bongiovanni, to pursue this, and if you're conflicted, then let's get, obviously somebody else.
I don't think I am, if we're talking about opening lines of communication. Anything beyond that, then
My recommendation to the council would be, we've got to have a written agreement that says we have a right-of-way to get to the property. Now, fortunately, there's other ways to get to Bear Swamp. The problem is, you can only get to one side through Mr. Van Schuik's bridge, and then there's a separate access point down the road, behind us.
Preventorium.
Or Preventorium. So I'd like to recommend that we pursue getting the right-of-way to cross the bridge, and that secondarily, we get, I think Mrs. Neskevich, who's here, was very much involved originally with Bear Swamp and its passive use. Perhaps we can get Mrs. Neskevich to agree to get actively involved with this again in conjunction with the Rec Advisory Committee to specifically map out policies and procedures around uses, hours of operation, when it's safe. It's dark. We don't want people having walking in trails that might be unprotected at 11 o'clock at night.
What
So
I'd-
all
what
the
I-
detail.
What I'd like to suggest, Mayor, is that possibly we get together with, as you said, Ms. Niskevich, maybe a representative from the Recreation Advisory. There are some other people that were involved, and I'm sorry, but Kim, I believe, no longer. Okay.
But you have the list.
But there's some people that were very involved that we could go over,
Okay.
come up with a plan and come back.
And
I
does
think
the
that would
council
probably be
agree
best.
with, we got to get this Van Schuik Bridge situation resolved?
Mayor, if I could, Mr. Slagle, could I
Bless
ask
you.
Mr. Nunziato a question?
Mr.
Certainly.
Nunziato, go ahead.
Mr. Nunziato, is this that concrete bridge on Maxim Road that's about 200 meters west of the that chicken coop that buildings and grounds
Yes.
is?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the one.
The one that the guy just put the PVC fence up all along and put the lamp post up and putting the gate on? That bridge?
I haven't been out there recently.
I'd take a trip out there tomorrow.
No, I don't think he's done that. I was by that.
I just
It's-
drove by it coming here.
I thought, I mean, I was.
If it's a concrete bridge I'm
No,
thinking of.
There's a driveway just adjacent to the Pop Warner Fields. And if you keep going towards the back, it's about a 30-inch pipe, and it's actually like a homemade outlet.
Okay, so it's not the
No.
bridge that's
No.
west of that,
And-
No.
that goes to the property?
And we recently cooperated and assisted Mr. Van Schuik when there was a problem with the flooding of that bridge, did we not?
Okay.
Yes, it actually failed during a storm.
It failed during a storm, and
And
we
that's
used
correct.
township resources, the big PVC black pipe, the stone. We went out there and cooperated with him. And I think in the past, he's expressed, at least historically to Mr. Davis, an interest in working with us, but we didn't have the deeds, and so there wasn't any pressing reason.
As I said, if the matter was simply a matter of opening up lines of communication, that's not necessarily adversarial, since it's a simple issue of disclosure, there'd be no problem with me communicating with them. If you want more than that, if you feel that the time is ripe for something else, then I would be.
I think it's actually a mediation,
Yeah,
more so than anything else. We just need it mediated.
There's two different surveys, and the one of them says it's half and half, the other one says it's
Right.
totally one-way. So it has to be resolved via a
All
public
right,
survey.
So if that's the case, Mr. Pungevine, in light of those facts, would you be able to be involved on our behalf or not involved?
I think I could, yeah.
Okay, so does the council agree, two different tracks? One, resolve the legal issue of the access to the back of the property, and two, have Mrs. Schlegel coalesce the necessary people to begin working on a recommendation? Everybody in agreement?
That's
Go
fine.
forward.
Okay, that's it, 7A5.
Little-
Mrs. Niskevich, you'd like to make a comment? Just come up
Can
and
you come
introduce
up?
yourself for the record, please.
Elizabeth Niskevich, 150 Maxim Road. By resolution, I think 9604, advisor to Bear Swamp to the council. Anyway, I have with me an ordinance that was done in 1987 that specifically states what should be done on that property in the way of passive recreation. The
Great.
township attorney at the time was afraid that a council down the road might have a totally different idea of what should be done in there, and to protect us from that happening, they did an ordinance describing exactly what the uses should be and the auxiliary uses. So I don't see any problem going by that, or, magnifying off of it. It's actually pretty, distinct in what should be done. The other thing is, I would be afraid that that bridge got done in a manner in the future that would allow traffic to go over it that we would not want to see. So, yeah, I agree it needs some work, but it really should be a footbridge, a horse bridge, and a bridge to just support emergency vehicles or...
That's our same intent. There's no way it can accept vehicles other than emergency vehicles. It's for walking and horseback riding only.
Okay.
The bridge structurally couldn't handle anything else.
Well, I was always afraid that someone would come in and okay the funds to do an 18-wheeler bridge. That was always, I think that the people that started out in this project, some have passed on, you know, we're always afraid that that bridge would become something that it shouldn't be in the future. So, yeah, I want to see it shored up.
Well,
but-
if it'd be a big help for us, Mrs. Neskevich, if you could, when you're contacted by Mrs. Schlegel, bring the historical material that you have, and that certainly can be a precedent and the guiding principles used to formalize something, again, now that we'll finally have access to all of the property legally.
The sign that's on there now that specifically states what you can do in there came off of the ordinance. My question would be, is that ordinance still valid? Or somewhere along the line, did all ordinance get thrown out?
There was a question regarding that ordinance, if you remember, going back. We'll have to check into that, but the intent is clear, and from the direction that I'm getting from the mayor and council is that the intent is the same as the ordinance. And I will tell you, there was never a discussion to make that bridge for vehicular traffic, other than an emergency vehicle.
We weren't going to put 500 campers over it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, if they walk, and
No, there'll be parking, obviously, on the outside, and you'd have to walk into
Yeah,
the...
we have a lot of things to discuss, because right now,
Absolutely.
there's no trailer parking. People will call me and say, well, if I came with a horse trailer from another part of town, where do I park?
Park, sure.
And
Those are
We have to
things
address a
that
lot
we'll
of-
have to address, put some kind of tentative plan together, bring back to the council.
Right.
So I'll be calling you, actually, I'll be away next week, the week after.
Okay.
But I'll let you know, and we'll schedule something. Get
Thank you,
everybody
Mrs.
together.
Neskevich.
Thank you.
Just to, go right ahead, sir, come on up. Just give us your name and address, please.
It's Daniel Brescia, 532 Lakewood Farmingdale Road.
Good evening, thank
I
you.
just had some input with the Bear Swamp Park, because I own 14 acres that butt up to actually Van Squig's property where the bridge is.
Okay.
I'm like right in the back of that big field next to the kennel.
Sure.
And I'm up for anything in that park, basically, as long as it's just from like sun up to sundown, because by living there, I've been there since 1998, I've had lots of problems with kids getting lost at night, finding quads coming trespassing on my
Absolutely.
property. I'm back there mountain biking, I myself walk back there, and I've come across numerous areas where there are beer bottles and stuff like that going on. Plus, the whole block is basically residential homes, so I think if you left it open 24 hours for camping, you're leaving it open for people to come in and have access to everybody's backyard in the middle of the night. With people keep equipment and keeping toms or whatever else.
And this is, you're making the point, which is exactly why, now that we physically have the property in our possession, we have a fiduciary ownership responsibility to make sure we've got the right safeguards for all the things that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, I said I'm totally for open parks and stuff like that, and I said I use them myself, I just don't think it would be good to do, allowing campgrounds.
Actually, if you could leave your information with me,
Great.
then certainly...
You've been deputized.
I'd love to,
Yeah.
I'd love to get involved with it, to be honest with you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for volunteering.
Just that, you had a
If you want to just write down
Just a
your
general
name and
announcement.
phone number,
I
and, okay?
want to make a
And
general
we'll meet in a
announcement for
couple
the
weeks.
public. Anyone who is here tonight with respect to 8A7 that is going to be tabled, we're not going to do it at this moment, but 8A7 will be tabled. So if you're here only for 8A7, again, I reiterate, when we get to 8A7, that in fact will be tabled. All right, moving along, we've got some unfinished business and then resolutions. Call the council's attention to 8A1, amending Chapter 13.3, Emergency Service Benefits. No action this evening. This was introduced on the 20th of May. It's scheduled for a hearing on June the 24th. 8A2, 8A3, 4, 5, and 6 similarly are slated to be heard from a public hearing perspective on June 24th. As I mentioned, 8A7 was slated for there to be a public hearing and adoption this evening. From a parliamentary perspective, I believe we need a motion to lay on the table, or to table this particular article. And so I'd ask a member of the council to make a motion to table this article until the, what meeting, Mrs. Woolman? Until the July 15th meeting, please.
July 15th?
Is that the date, the 15th?
Make
Okay.
a motion that we table 8A7 till July 15th, Mayor.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please, to lay to the table 8A7.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. 8A8, call the council's attention. This is 08-0812, amending the land use of outdoor display of goods. This was introduced on May 20th and is slated for a public hearing and adoption this evening. So hold on one second.
Monster.
Okay, 8A8, ordinance number 00812, introduced and passed on the first reading on May 20, 2008, and published according to laws now being acted upon for further consideration at a public hearing. Affidavit of the publication of the content of this ordinance and the Asbury Park Press issue of 5/23/08 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and the copies were available to the general public upon request. Ms. Wilman, would you please read the title of this ordinance?
An ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Howell amending the Code of Howell Township, Chapter 188-68, entitled Outdoor Display of Goods.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open up the meeting to members of the general public for anyone who'd like to enter comments for or against the possible adoption of this particular ordinance. If you'd like to be recognized, please come forward. Mrs. Smith, come on up. Hello again, Mrs. Smith.
Good evening. Pauline Smith, 54 Vanderveer Road. I have to apologize. I really didn't look at this ordinance, but when I saw it on the agenda, I just want to make sure. Well, let me explain quickly my concern and then see if you can alleviate it. Unfortunately, having been on the planning board for a good many years and being a participant in making plans for retail outlets and restricting their, for the sake of residents and the environment, their storage of certain materials. And even though they agreed to it, for instance, Lowe's has things in the parking spaces that were supposed to be for commercial customers, the larger spaces.
You mean that parking lot down the whole side that they've now shut off for all of their outdoor storage of goods?
Exactly. This ordinance doesn't by any means allow that to happen, does it?
No.
Just a concern. And is there anything we can do to enforce that instead of bothering poor little single residents who might have a teenager working on a car in the side yard, but the neighbors don't like it, so he's harassed?
They were cited by our code enforcement.
But they're still doing it. What can we do about it? Now, there's a good ordinance, and a good place for a little bit of revenue. A good, healthy fine to make them do the right thing. They're in violation of their resolution. It's all written out very clearly. I know that one in particular. But anyway, we're talking about this ordinance now. I'm accepting your word that it doesn't make these things any more lenient on this type of situation. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on this particular item? All right, seeing no one, let the record reflect. I'm going to close the public portion. Member of the council, please proceed.
Mr. Mayor, this ordinance happened to be on for the planning board's comments as well, and
sure,
I will report that the planning board found that it was in keeping with the master plan. I did notice, though, a couple of what I think are minor, not substantive typo issues.
Go right ahead, please.
Section 1A, HD2 is listed twice. I think it should just be HD2 one time, so that should be crossed out. And Section 1C1A, it says HD1 and HD zones. It should be added, HD2 should be the second one. So those are just my two observations. I don't think that those are...
I don't think that's a
These are clerical in nature, Mr. Bongiovanni, so there's no need to re-advertise, correct?
HD2 could be a tough one, not being in there.
I'm trying to think if there is HD zone. There is no HD zone.
No, there's HD1 and HD2.
So that's fine.
And HD3 now.
There is HD3.
There is HD3 now, but the discussion...
If there was an HD zone,
Right.
I'd say it's a problem.
The discussion at the planning board meeting was that this wasn't applying to HD3, and there are reasons why it shouldn't, because HD3 has residential, so.
Okay.
because there is no HD2, there is no HD zone.
Right.
All right, very well. Any other comments? Okay, we need a member of the council to please proceed.
Motion to ordinance number 0-08-12 be finally passed and adopted, and the notice of its passing and adoption be published in the 6/13/08 issued to the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Any final comments or remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton? Yes. Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes, 8A9 is amending Chapter 265.2, Portable Sports Equipment in the Public Streets. Accordingly, ordinance number 00813, introduced and passed on the first reading on 5/20/08 and published according to law, is now being taken upon further consideration in a public hearing. Affidavit of the publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of 5/23/08 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and the copies are available to the general public upon request. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the title of the ordinance?
An ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Howell amending the Code of Howell Township, Chapter 265, Snow and Ice, Article 1, Parking, Section 265-2, entitled Portable Sports Equipment in Public Streets Prohibited During Winter Months, to be re-entitled Portable Sports Equipment in Public Streets.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open up the meeting for public hearing. Anyone who'd like to enter in comments for or against the possible adoption of this ordinance, please come forward. Mrs. Smith?
This one I did read, and this one I am absolutely, totally, 1,000,000% opposed to. We are giving permission for people to allow their children to play in the street. That's asinine. Yes, we are. Portable sports equipment, just by... What's the street for? What's its intention? It's a public thoroughfare, not for children to play in.
Mrs. Smith, I think the answer, you make a very fair observation. The difficulty we have is that there is nothing that can prohibit us from having these items and devices in the street now, and they are in the street now. All this ordinance does is it gives us the appropriate authority to see to it that all portable equipment and apparatus in the streets and the right-of-way are simply prohibited in the winter months, so that they don't stay in the street.
And on the neighbor's
Mayor,
property.
And obviously on your neighbor's property was the other
I fully
piece.
understand the intent of the ordinance.
Because it's happening already.
But my contention is that I believe, according to state laws, you don't put anything out there in the street. And why don't we have an ordinance that says that you can't put your personal belongings in the street? Those same people that use the public street for their private use are going to be the very ones that if something happens to their child who shouldn't be playing in the street, they sue the township. Because if you read that ordinance, by virtue of us having an ordinance that permits them in front of their house, because that's what this ordinance does. And you're not going to listen to me. I know you're not, but I want to go on record as saying it's wrong, wrong, wrong.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, Mrs. Smith. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized in this? Anyone else who'd like to be recognized? All right, seeing no one, we're going to close the public hearing on this. Member of the council, please proceed.
Motion to ordinance number 0-08-13 be finally passed and adopted, and notice of its passing and adoption be published in the 6/13/08 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Mrs. Woolman.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, 8A10. This is amending Chapter 277, Signs, Construction Sites. Ordinance 0814, introduced and passed on first reading on 5/20/08 and published according to law, is now being taken upon further consideration in a public hearing. Affidavit of the publication of the ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of 5/23/08 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance was posted in the bulletin board in the municipal building, and the copies were available to the general public upon request. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the title of the ordinance?
You did. An ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Howell amending the Code of Howell Township, Chapter 277, Streets and Sidewalks, Article 3, Traffic Control for Streets and Highway Construction, Section 277-14, entitled Site Preparation, and Section 277-15, entitled Violations and Penalties.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open up the meeting to members of the general public for anyone who'd like to enter comments for or against the possible adoption of this ordinance. Anyone who'd like to be recognized, please come forward. Anyone who'd like to be recognized? All right, let the record reflect that there are no requests for public comment on 8A10. I'm going to close the public portion and ask a member of the council to proceed.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that ordinance number 0-08-14 be finally passed and adopted, and that ordinance of its, that notice of its passage and adoption be published in this June 1308 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any final comments or remarks?
Mayor, I'd just like to ensure that existing active construction sites are also required.
Mr. Bongiovanni's
Place these
case.
signs in within a, I would imagine, like a 7-day time period.
Whether or not this applies to current construction sites, or does this only apply to construction sites that commence operations after the adoption?
I would believe it would apply to all.
All right, in Mrs. Schlegel's absence, could you just please ask that, here comes Mrs. Schlegel now. Did you have a comment, Mrs. Dalton? We'll come
You know,
back to
I
it.
have a question.
Go right ahead, ma'am.
I thought when we workshopped this, the issue was because the fines are so steep. There was a question as to whether it should be person versus contractor. Does anyone have a recollection of that?
No.
No.
I really don't. Did you workshop this when it was gone last month?
I don't recall.
Yeah, Mr. Walsh and I were both not at the last meeting when this was workshopped.
What, the construction sites?
Yeah, didn't we talk about it only applying to the contractor and not, you know, Joe Worker who's on site?
No, this actually had to do with, the deputy mayor, this had to do with posting the hours.
Yeah,
Right.
Mrs.
Fine.
Dalton's
Oh, I'm
question
sorry.
is whether or not, if someone violated the ordinance and there was a fine, would it be the individual, or would it be the larger contractor,
The large,
subcontractor?
I believe the
See,
larger
my
contractor.
recollection is that Mrs. Showmaker's not here to back me up on this, but I recall that she and I both discussed the concern that it was the actual contractor.
That's correct.
Or developer who was going to get the fine.
Not-
And not the person. Because the way I read it, the change, it says now it says any person contractor with no punctuation. So I think we need to clarify that, because
Well, if we just remove the word person and just put contractor.
that's what I thought was going to happen.
Right.
Well, I think the better way to do it is just to recognize a grammatical change and make that person.
Except if we do that, then we're still saying that Joe Smith,
gotta- you gotta
the guy
talk
on
up.
the job.
Hit the
Person
mic.
dash contractor would be the same thing. He'd be a person contractor.
Well, I think Mrs. Dalton's concern is you could have 5 people working for one contractor, and all 5 of them would get zapped.
What I'm saying is the person would have to be a contractor. He's a person contractor.
Well, no, because the person doesn't have to be a contractor, you can be an employee of the
The only
contractor.
person who would be cited would be the person contractor.
Yeah, but a contractor could be, you know,
The guy that
a
gets
corporate
brought in
company,
to
I
put
mean-
up the sheetrock that day as a sub versus Toll Brothers, the enterprise.
It's
Right.
supposed to be like the developer.
right.
It has to be the owner of the property. It can't be
Right,
the
that's correct.
subcontractor,
That's,
not like
that's
that.
correct.
It
Has
can't
to
be,
be.
yeah, it can't be the plumber that
Mrs.
was
Dalton
brought
is
in.
correct. That's what the intent was.
It has to be the owner of that
But
property.
if, is
Well, no,
the-
it doesn't, because the owner of the property just says, I want it done. The plumbing contractor may come in and tell those guys, I don't care what the hell the law says, I want you to go there on Saturday and Sunday and work 15 hours.
But
So
the-
now it became the plumbing contractor, Toll Brothers is sitting in, on his, the guy who owns Toll Brothers sitting on his boat somewhere, he doesn't know that the guy's working on a Sunday. So,
I
the
think-
company, the mechanical contractor or whatever contractor, should be held responsible, not his employees. So that's why I think if we just strike the word any person
Yeah,
and just say any contractor.
My recollection is that the
Is
request
that a
was to remove
substantive
the
change,
word
Mr.
person
Bongiovanni, or
and just
can-
leave contractor.
Or do we need to, it seems to me that a person is not a contractor, and hence, this could be a material change, the way it's been advertised.
Yes. Unless we recognize that the intent was just to say it's a person who's a contractor. Since that's who we want to
Why don't we
cite.
just get it right?
I make a motion, we
let's
table
get it
it.
right.
Let's
Second.
table and get it
Okay,
right.
we,
Change it to the word just contractor?
Yeah, just contractor.
okay,
Just
one,
contractor,
I think we need to do this. I think from a parliamentary perspective, we need to vote no, and it needs to be corrected and re-advertised with the appropriate
Oh, yes,
verbiage.
you're right about
Okay.
that.
So we've had a motion and a second. We've closed the public hearing. At this point, to correct this deficiency, a no vote would allow the attorney to go back, correct it, and we'll reintroduce. Is that right? Yes. Yes? Okay. So any additional discussion? Any other changes we want to make or corrections to be captured?
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask, is this to be enforced by code enforcement?
I believe it is.
Yes.
Mr. Naziano, with all due respect, I'm not going to enforce it.
Well, how do we enforce it then on a Sunday and Saturday when code enforcement isn't working?
Well, it's not going to be, I don't believe the police
Hold on,
department
hold on.
won't be enforcing.
Yeah, I believe the police department now
Citizens and cell phones.
is enforcing this noise ordinance for the construction noises. I believe the police department enforces
Well,
that.
if the
Is that
sign,
correct, Mr. Naziano? Thank you.
if the signs are up from, on Monday through Friday, it's unlikely that they would take the signs down on Saturday and Sunday.
No, he's talking about working on the off hours.
Right.
Right. Am I correct, Deputy Mayor?
I think from a practical matter, what's going to happen is someone is going to, whatever off hour it is going to call the police
That's
department and
correct.
say, so-and-so is out here doing this. And the police department is going to go out and say to them, here's what the sign allows you to do, cease and desist. I would imagine they send a report to the code enforcement, who then goes out, issues the appropriate summons and penalties and what have you.
I
Is
believe
that
what will
accurate?
happen is that code enforcement will enforce the fact that there's a sign that states, that has all the proper information. They enforce
Yeah.
the actual, that the sign is up.
But how
And then
would
the
they-
police department enforces
Well, they'll go there and
the
tell them
hours.
to stop.
Yeah.
But who physically then, the following Monday morning, writes the code infraction notice? Does that
I
happen?
don't believe it's a code infraction, it's a violation of ordinance, it's a, they
So
broke
then
the
it is
law.
a police power.
That's
Okay,
correct.
there you have it. All right, roll call, please, and a no vote would help us remedy this.
Mrs. Dalton?
No.
Mr. Howell?
No.
Mr. Walsh?
No.
Mayor DeBella?
No.
Can I just ask one more question?
Go right ahead,
Since we're going to
please.
go back and try to get this together. I thought we also had a discussion, and I know, well, this is a workshop, so. I thought we had also had a discussion about what were the actual days, and we talked about weekends and holidays, and there was some discussion, and maybe this was at the last meeting too, about whose calendar we're going to follow.
Right, because in our ordinance book, it says legal holidays, and,
That's correct.
right, because the township employees have much different legal holidays than, somebody
Private
who doesn't work
employees.
here.
There was discussion on that, but I don't know if you came to any agreement.
It's a good thing the buck stops with you.
I said that we go with whatever the the federal holidays are.
Right.
Post office is closed,
Okay,
Well.
but that's up
That's
to
fine.
what the
Go ahead,
direction
Mrs.
of the
Dalton.
council
I mean,
is.
okay, then let me put in my 2 cents. I think I think there's got to be some leeway for some legal holidays which aren't necessarily considered a real day of rest for people or a day of celebration, and where business continues to be conducted. I don't think it would be fair to say that every holiday that is, that the post office isn't working, that building can't continue.
So you're telling me that as an American Italian, they're allowed to work on Columbus Day?
I
We should
didn't
be
say
celebrating.
it with particularity. But you know what? As a business owner,
I could not agree
you
more
know,
with you.
and I'm an attorney, and my firm is not closed at every legal holiday.
Well, I had mentioned federal because I know they're not closed as
Right.
like the state is closed. So but that's up to the,
Does
I
that
think we
need
had
to be
decided
addressed in the
federal.
ordinance, or can that be done administratively through promulgation?
well, I'm thinking, though, you need to have something that can be enforced. So if it's going to be enforced, then it would need to be in the ordinance.
Yeah, but you already have a noise ordinance that says, gives hours Monday through Friday, Saturday, no Sunday, and no holidays. That's all it says, is no holidays.
Well, the
It's
problem,
not
I think, that
specific.
Mrs.
No, I think it says no legal
The
holidays.
definition of a holiday.
The problem Mrs. Dalton and Mr. Howell speak to is whose definition of holiday?
I mean, Election Day is a legal holiday.
No, well, the post office is open on Election Day.
I think we had come to the answer that we were going to follow the federal holiday calendar.
Yeah, I thought that, but
That was my recollection.
Well, I mean, what do we do today? I mean, could we maybe ask our enforcement department, what schedule of holidays are they applying now? Is it state, is it federal, is it township via our contracts?
I don't believe it's township holidays.
All right, well,
I mean,
I think we should just stay with what we said and go with the federal holidays.
federal holidays is certainly, if you'd like to make that as a recommendation, and then we can
I thought we
codify
had.
that in the ordinance.
Do you
so
want a
that's
list of the
President's Day, Columbus Day, Good Friday is a federal holiday. I mean, I would suggest, this is just I throw this out, it should be Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Independence Day, and
Let me
that's
offer
it.
this by way of compromise.
Need to work.
Yeah, by way of compromise, perhaps Mrs. Schlegel can email the council a list of all of the federal holidays. We can then independently email back what our recommendations are and allow those to be presented to us in advance of the ordinance and say, this is what everyone came up with, majority rules. 5 people said they want the 4th of July to be a holiday, and 2 people said they wanted this one, and this is a democracy. Anyone disagree?
It's fine.
We'll get the list of the federals, we'll send you our comments, and then we can
Okay.
include that in the ordinance.
That's fine.
Everyone agreeable with that as a
That's fine.
compromise? Okay.
fine.
All right, terrific. So you'll make those corrections for our review. Okay, if we go to new business, 9A1.
What about the soil?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have 8A11, I apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinance 0815, introduced and passed on first reading on 5/2008 and published according to laws, not be taken upon further consideration in the public hearing. Affidavit of the publication of the ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue 5/2308 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance was posted in the bulletin board in the municipal building, and the copies are available to the general public upon request. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the title of the ordinance?
An ordinance amending the Code of Howell Township Ordinance, Chapter 269, Section 9C, entitled Bond and Insurance Requirements.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open the meeting to members of the general public for anyone who might like to enter comments for or against the possible adoption of this ordinance. Would anyone like to be recognized? Would anyone like to be recognized? All right, let the record reflect there were no requests from the public. I'm going to close the public hearing and ask that a member of the council introduce a motion.
Motion that ordinance number 0-08-15 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption be published in the 6/13/2008 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any final comments or remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, new business. 9A1 needs to be struck. We're not in a position on June 24th to introduce anything yet, unless your office can move at lightning speed. We just talked about this tonight.
Right.
Okay, so 9A1 gets struck for our official meeting.
Mayor, before you move on to 9A2, I need to get out of here. I have via Philadelphia Airport at 4:30 in the morning.
Safe travels. Thanks, Mr. Howell. Have a good night.
All right.
9A2, this is slated to be introduced on the 24th with a public hearing on the 15th. 9A3, establishing personnel policies for certain positions. This is slated to be introduced tonight. It was pulled, so we're not taking action on 9A3. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And 9A4 is a donation of land, blocks 25, lots 2102, 2404, and 41, which I believe constitute the bane of my former existence, heretofore known as the Fountains. Couldn't you have done this about 4 years ago? I had a hell of a lot more hair back then.
Really would
Okay.
have saved some aggravation, huh, Mike?
Wow. All right, 9A4, this is slated to be introduced on June the 24th. For the benefit of the public, the Fountains is a large part, was referred to as what had historically been known as Council of Affordable Housing Site Number 7, which was in the original Round 2 provisions for affordable housing, Round 1 for affordable housing. A couple of years back, the owner of the property proceeded to put in an application to the planning board to build what I would qualify as high-density residential occupational units on the property. It went through various hearings. There ultimately was a settlement agreement between the township and the property owner that puts certain limitations on what could be built. It was agreed there'd be 25 residential homes and 90 units on Route 9, which were limited to be active senior Township agreed, signed off, there was an agreement, and lo and behold, a few weeks back, the township manager advised us that for whatever the business reasons were, the owner of the property has no longer any interest in building there, and in fact is going to give to the town at no expense all of the land in question. There'll be nothing built, and all of the property will be deeded over to Howell Township. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Anything else on Ed?
That's correct.
No. Okay, so I see that the attorney for the Fountains Project is here. Is there any reason that we should recognize counsel, Mr. Bongiovanni?
Other than he's here and he's been sitting very patiently, and
I'm sure he's happy to bill his client.
No, we actually have an agreement that we had to go over, and we're almost through with that, and that just should be in place in time for the ordinance, so that would be, 2 weeks from today, so that's great.
Counselor, you want to come up and introduce yourself? Is there anything you'd like to enter into the record?
No, other than it is somewhat of an anticlimactic end to a solution that I like to think is municipality working at its best with the property owner and with the public. And unfortunately, the market was the fourth participant who never showed up. So the best solution right now is to donate the parcel to the township for open space. And I did receive Mr. Bongiovanni's comment to the proposed donation agreement. I don't think we have a problem with them. I'll work them out with Mr. Bongiovanni. I assume we can get it done by June 24th so that it can be
Terrific.
introduced that night.
I'm sure we will.
Wonderful. Mrs. Dalton, go right ahead, ma'am.
How many affordable units was this project slated to fill? None.
It was coming out of the affordable housing. The settlement took it out of the affordable housing.
Okay.
It would have done
It would
zero.
have done no affordable.
Right.
Okay, so we're not, okay, so we don't have to go find those
No.
affordable
No.
somewhere else?
Actually, Howell had taken it out of the plan before. The property owner sued to keep it in. The settlement was to take it out, but to build this other project.
That
which-
was not inclusionary?
Correct.
No.
Okay. Oh,
Correct.
great, okay.
Now it's inclusionary of just the bog turtles.
So it's a win-win. Thank you, Counselor.
You're very welcome. Good to
Appreciate
see you.
it.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Okay, so we're going to act on 8/21 on the 24th. Now, if we go to resolutions, this is a workshop session. There was one thing that jumped out at me. I have no idea how 9B3 could be a resolution already. So we need to strike 9B3.
Yeah, that was only put on there in the anticipation that
Okay.
we would meet and if that
Gotcha.
took place. But it's only listed because it is a workshop. And
But it was under for discussion elsewhere
Right.
on the agenda. Okay. All right, so are there any questions on page 5, 9B1 to 9B7?
9B1, Mr. Mayor.
Go right ahead.
I don't know who can answer this for me.
Mr. Filiotro
And
can.
Mr. Mayor, you are in the healthcare insurance business, and you know about HIPAA and things like that. I have a lot of concern that the names of several people who have been patients transported to hospitals is appearing in a public ordinance that was adopted, that was published. If I looked on that and I saw my father-in-law's name on there, I would be mortified.
Yeah.
How is this legal? How is it, can't we figure out some other way? I mean, I practice in the family courts, I practice in the chancery courts. You hide people's names, you use initials, you don't put out that on March 7, 2007, Mrs. So-and-so went to the hospital.
We certainly, there were occasions where we had the resolutions when we had the old public assistance account, even the bill list for the public assistance, the checks, deleted the names. It just is nothing that had crossed my mind. It certainly is well taken, and I think we should institute that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just as a matter of protocol, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act absolutely does require that PHI, protected health information, be safeguarded at every measure. And so we do have a certain obligation. We should, by practice, simply indicate transportee 1, 2, 3, 4, resident 1, 2, 3, 4. We can maintain the records at our own discretion. What I would add, Mrs. Schlegel, is that as a township, we need to designate a privacy officer, and that these records that disclose the identities for back office purposes need to be protected, stored, and maintained in a way that preserves the confidentiality from anyone other than the privacy officer. So it's not to create more work for you, HIPAA does. So we need to make sure we've got policy procedures. Mrs. Dalton raises a very valid point.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on page 5?
Yeah, I just see 9B7 here. So PetSmart is going forward. I know it's been brought up to the council a few times in the last month or two. Ms. Nunziata, that project still going forward over there by Kmart?
They're finally going to post their bond, so they'll be able to get started, correct.
Okay.
All right, page 6, any comments? 9B8 to 9B18. Any comments? All right, moving on, page 7. Any comments on 9B19 to 9B29? I had a question on 9B27, but I'll wait in case there's anything before that.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Howell had mentioned that numerous times, I believe.
Yep. So on 9B27, Mrs. Schlegel, can you just elaborate for the benefit of the public? This says authorize an interlocal services agreement between the township and the school board providing automated emergency notification, phone and text messaging services.
Yes, there's an agreement that 1 year, I don't know, Mr. Filiaccio, if you have that, where we're paying for the 1 year and then the school board is paying. And do you have that information with you? On the code red?
We had authorized the code red, and this is an interlocal agreement where the school board is sharing in the cost of that to be included in the notification system. So we can notify parents of early dismissal, snow dismissal, other horrible things. So it certainly makes sense, and the school board has offered that they would pay half the cost by paying the full premium for 1 year every other year.
Right, so we're paying 1 year, they're paying 1 year, we're paying 1 year.
And how will this be communicated to the residents so that people know the availability of this service? Or is that going to be handled by the school board and?
Through the school board and through our police department, but it'll be a combination, I believe, of telephone emergency as well as text messaging, and I also believe through the computer, if I'm not mistaken, but I'd have to get you more information. I don't have all the details on that, but I could certainly provide that with you.
The only thing I'd like to see us do is this should be prominently posted as an update to the community on our website, that this feature is available, how someone could sign up to be text messaged.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I'll get you more information on this in the particulars.
Great.
I apologize, I
No,
don't
that's
have that
okay.
in front of me.
Anything else on page 7, 9B19 to 29? Okay. Page 8, 9B30 to 9B40. Any questions? 9B30 to 40. Moving on, page 9, 9B41 to 9B52, and we've already acted on 41 to 46, so we're only looking at 47 to 52.
I had a question on 48, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I don't have no contract in my book.
Yeah. Yep.
I would like to see the contract I'm voting on.
Well, that's for next, what happened is there was a committee that looked at all the bids that had come in on this. So they have gone over them and they have, scored, gave them scores. There was a weighted score. They're now looking for more information, and they're going to, there's no it has not been awarded yet. This is for the 24th, so you'll have that information.
Ms. Schlegel, with all due respect, this says 9B48.
She just wanted to
Authorized awarded
reserve.
contract.
Right, but this is for the 24th. She wanted to reserve the spot. That's why that's on there.
The only comment I would add to Mr. Walsh's concern is we all could very well, and I appreciate your explanation, it makes sense, but we all show up on the 24th, expected to vote on the contract on the 24th, and have not had sufficient time to review its terms and conditions. So if the expectation is we get it on the 24th, or maybe just shortly prior to that, I don't know how we'll have had a chance to really review it and then act on it on the 24th. Is that your point?
Absolutely.
Well, you won't have time to discuss it amongst yourselves, but the idea would be for you to have it in your hands by, say, next Thursday?
Right.
All right, so if we have the agreement in our hands by next Thursday,
Right.
is the council satisfied that we'll have had sufficient time to review it between then and the 24th?
Yeah, I'd be fine.
Well, I think so,
Okay.
and I think we've shown tonight that if we're not happy,
We pull it.
Absolutely. We'll pull it.
I was just deferring to Mr. Walsh's comment because it was a very valid point.
I
Which-
think, I'm sorry, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
no, please.
I think, personally, I kind of like the way it is, even if something, so that we know what's coming up. I know that in prior agendas, it just says reserved, reserved, reserved.
At least we know what it's reserved for.
Right, so maybe we could just put, if it's not going to be in our book for a workshop, but it's going to be reserved for the next, regular meeting, maybe we could just on the agenda have a note that it's not in our packet yet, so that, we're not looking, because obviously, if we're looking for something and it's not there, we immediately react a certain way.
Yeah, Mr. Walsh is always saying terrible things about poor Mr. Davis, and his book is incomplete, and it's horrible.
Listen, I did not used to come in here and find 8 or 10 different things on the desk.
That's
I didn't
right.
have time
Absolutely.
to review, think
No.
about, ask questions about.
You got to review it.
Yeah, I think things are going much better, and not a lot of stuff here when we come in, so.
All right, so page 10, 9B 53 and 54. We've already acted on 55. Any comments on 53 or 54? All right, and there are no motions. 9C1 is removal of Citizen Participation Group member Steve Fursick. His term expires at the end of next year. Nothing under information. Before I open it up to the general public, Mrs. Schlegel, is there anything else for the council's consideration?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open up the meeting to members of the public for any general comments or concerns they might have for the council's consideration. Yes, ma'am, come on up. Good evening, Mrs. Viking.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I will keep it very short because I know the clock's ticking and you might even get out of here early. Just very quick thank you for, one, pulling the outdoor gathering ordinance. Just thank you. And whoever initiated the whole settlement with the fountains, you're all to be congratulated. It was a that really is a coup for all of you, every last one of you. And I know, Mr. DeBella, you worked very hard on that issue 4 years ago. So it is a coup for all of you. I just wanted to mention, in reviewing the ordinance for the Retirement Act of Adult Communities, when I reviewed the property, I understand the block and lots have been pulled out that pertain to the mobile home ordinance, at least, or the mobile home park. At least that's the explanation I got. However, Block 136, Lot 01, and you haven't introduced it yet, so it can still be changed without a problem, is registered to Green Acres LLC. And I believe when they come before the mobile home rent control board, which I am the vice chair, that they include that property. It may only house their common facilities and the manager's house. There might not actually be a mobile home on that particular lot, but that, I believe, is part of the mobile home park. So if you could check that, tax records say Green Acres LLC on it.
It's been introduced, though. It was introduced last week.
They may own it, but it's really not in the mobile home park. And the idea was to treat the mobile home park exempt. Now, that may mean that the park owner eventually may want to move his person from out of the park into the park, but it really is not affecting property that's part of the park.
It's contiguous.
It's contiguous.
And I believe
All the
there's-
property's contiguous.
And I believe that there's common facilities on there. Now, as well as the manager's house, so it really is part of the park, because when he comes before us, I believe that's part and parcel of everything that they come before us. My suggestion would be, when you have the public hearing, that in order to avoid a lot of complexities, I'll leave it to the two attorneys up here, whether or not deleting a lot really is substantial. I don't believe it is. If it is considered substantial, you could carry the public hearing, introduce an amendment, and then have an hearing on the amendment only. That would save you a lot of time and advertising money. That would be my suggestion, but I do think you need to look at 136 Lot 101 because it is Green Acres LLC, and I believe there's common properties, such as, you know, in the villages, you have a pool and that sort of thing. I don't think they have a pool, but I believe they have common things on
Are you
there.
aware if there's anything there other than the manager's home?
And the manager's home is considered part of the park.
I have an aerial that's at like 500 scale, so
Right, so you
I
don't-
could see at least one house, but the pads are certainly the other lot, but we'll find out.
Yeah,
before the-
because it is considered part of and parcel of the park when they come before us.
If it's more than the manager's home, I think then what we should do would be do an amendment, just to keep the forward momentum
Even if it
going.
is the manager's home, it's the
Well,
manager's
well-
got to be somewhere.
But it is also an ARE2 lot. It's not zoned as mobile home park like the
Yeah.
other lot is.
The manager has to be somewhere, but he could be moved into the park.
Well, he could be, but on the other hand, it's considered part of the park.
If it's
Right
on
now.
ARE2, it's ARE2 there.
Yeah, but that's...
Right, it's not
It's
MHP. That lot's
it's
not MHP.
It's not zoned mobile home park right now. It's zoned ARE2.
I just think maybe you want to go back and take a look, since it's part of the
Absolutely. Will you
park
check that for us,
operations.
Mr. Bongiovanni, so that
Yeah,
we're
I'll work
prepared?
with Mr.
Okay.
Nunziato
Thank you,
about it.
Mrs. White.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I do apologize. There was a list, and both Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you're on it. No, it's okay, Mrs. Weingruber. I overlooked it. So, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which of you would like to go first if you still have a need to? You have a need to. Okay. Come on up. And then Mr. Coffey, you're also on the list? No need?
I'll wait till the deputy mayor's here.
Okay. Hello, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Costigan, I see you've entered the chambers. And so, as a courtesy, I don't know when you came in, you heard Mrs. Weingruber mention it. 8A7 was pulled from the agenda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor and council.
Yeah, the council's discretion as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, good evening again.
Mrs. Smith, 54 Vanderveer Road. And just in case you don't know, 54 Vanderveer Road has a frontage of 200-plus feet. That's our residence, Don and mine. And on that little piece of property, there must be at least a dozen portable recreation, pieces of portable recreation equipment. Now, how about, since you've adopted an ordinance, I go home this weekend and I push those suckers out onto Vanderveer Road, so the basketball and the soccer ball, etc., doesn't get in my rose garden or my flower beds or my tomato patch. What's going to happen? The police are going to come and say, you're obstructing traffic. And I'm going to say, when I go before the judge, the council passed an ordinance that says in the warm months, I can put I can put pieces of portable recreation equipment in front of my residence. Now, how does that sound? Because that's what you've done. And I still think it's wrong. You've given permission. Whether people are doing it or not. Now, it sounds like I'm being facetious, but I'm not, because that's what people do. They put that equipment out there in the road on property that they don't pay tax on, that they don't maintain, so that they can have manicured yards. Well, maybe I'd like a manicured yard instead of providing for friends and neighbors and family. Not myself, I don't play those things anymore. I can't run that fast. But believe me, I'm out there, and I could do that, and it would be fair. And then what would you do with that ordinance? It's about as good as, it's all it's good for, to tell you the truth. Now, let's do something positive. Now, first I want to make a comment. Mr. DeBella, if you think the fountains was a bane to your existence, you should have been chairman of the planning board and have those people at you all the time in accusations of, it was not a good, happy time, believe me. And I'm so thankful for the outcome for us all. I guess the economy is good for something. And on that note, the main reason that I wanted to speak tonight was to bring to your attention, I never thought about it until it was brought up at a meeting or two ago about the recycling the firm that picks up the recycling. Well, they pick up our recycling, okay, but I understand other people have a lot of complaints that they're passed by, don't even go by their roads. But I didn't remember. I know I knew at the time the ordinance, or was it well, anyway, when it was, the company was changed, that the contract was per house. And I'm telling you, people don't recycle in Howell Township like they used to. We used to, for a long, long time, we were outstanding and a place to be proud of when it came to recycling. People don't bother. I think there are maybe 2 houses beside ours on Vanderveer Road that put out recycling. And most of the country
Smith, you are, and just as a point of clarification, there are many residents who bring their recycling themselves to our recycling center.
I know, and I
So
used to
a
do
lot of
that
people,
when I
in
was
fact,
more
do that.
able, but a lot of them don't either. And we pay separately for that. This is my point. My only point is the contract. The contract should be looked at again if they are not doing what they're contracted to do, whether they're needed or not. There must be some provision somewhere in the law that allows you to do that as a municipality. Just suggesting that you do that, and that I have seen that there's not a necessity for it if no other reason. And something that really has bothered me for a long time, but I don't say anything because I figured, why make trouble if it's not necessary? But it becomes a matter of dollars and cents, and it's a small example. But again, it's a bane to my existence. Hot, sunny summer last year, and approximately every week that blanket berm across the road from me was mowed. There was no grass. I couldn't keep my car washed because there wasn't water in the well to keep washing the car every time the berm, which wasn't growing anything but brown dirt, was mowed.
Mayor, that's 5 minutes.
Thank you. But when I look at the time that it takes, the employees that it takes just to do the berm, I'm not talking about the acreage of the playground where the children run and play and throw a ball and are in the playground. We have to be concerned about ticks. But technically, and believe me, I know, that berm was a compromise. It's a farmland buffer. It was an agreement, and the big arguments back when that development then called Georgetown got their approvals. That berm was part of the agreement, and it is a farmland buffer, which does not permit activity. And I've never complained because, although sometimes it's rather rude to have people sitting up on top of the berm looking in my windows, especially since I like to run around in my nightgown. It's true.
Mrs. Smith, please wrap it up for us. I've heard all I can hear.
Hold on. Gavel her.
No, but the fact remains.
Hold on.
You can not mow that and put up signs that say to keep off the berm. You'd save a few bucks, which need to be done, and besides, you've seen me in never mind.
No, let's stop right there. I haven't seen anything.
Yes, you most certainly have. When you were campaigning, you knocked on my door and I was in my robe. I am completely covered. I have more. I'm covered the way I go around the house in my robe more than I am now.
This sounds like a conversation between you and Don.
Mr. Smith is blushing.
Mr. Poor your husband is as red as a tomato.
He's laughing.
How
because
many
he
minutes
knows.
has it been?
All right, Mrs. Smith, we'll look into it. Mrs. Schlegel, you'll check into the
Do you
berm issue and the
understand
use.
my
Absolutely.
point? It's unnecessary, and I'm not going
As
to
long as
say.
we don't have to talk about any more paraphernalia, nightgowns, lingerie, we'll do whatever you ask.
Well, it's my right. I have to go out in the mail to the mailbox.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
You're not going to complain if we don't mow the berm?
No. It's not supposed to be mowed. It was supposed to be planted and not, a farmland buffer is not manicured, but the people in the development wanted to see it manicured.
Right, that's the right, that's the
And
issue.
they're not
You'll
even
check
supposed
out
to
the
be
certainly
on
will.
it.
I certainly will.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Smith, you are allowed to come up, provided you don't share any intimate details of what you wear outside of this chamber.
You wouldn't want to hear
No,
that,
you're
really.
exactly right, which is why I'm laying the ground rules down right now.
Yeah. What were you wearing that day?
Good evening, Mr. Smith.
Good evening. Don Smith, 54 Vanderveer Road.
In conclusion, what do you have for us?
Actually, something completely different. As you're aware, I'm sure, there has been a recent proposal to put in an extension, a permit extension plan. In fact, I believe Assembly Malone was the one that put this forth. It would give developers a 6-year time extension, and it was going back starting from 2006. Now, as a longtime member of the Environmental Commission, I have to oppose it. The DEP opposes it, Sierra Club opposes it, and Mr. Mayor, you sat where you're sitting today, and also you've sat on the planning board. You remember what it was like when the housing boom broke and we got an onslaught of development, and unfortunately, they were not covered by the new regulations that came into effect. For example, flood hazard areas. We've picked up some new Category 1s in the North Howell section. They now have the Navesink watershed protected as Category 1. And I think
have a
that...
riparian buffer ordinance.
Yeah. Some of them might get trapped under the old one, but I'm sure they'd come in for amendments if they were trapped under the old 300-foot ordinance. But I really think that the council should consider a resolution in opposition to that bill. They seem to be under the impression that new housing development is the only bane to our economy right now, and I just wish they took care of the general public as well as they take care of the builders. I mean, I realize that New Jersey Builders Association is a very strong lobby, and they get their way pretty much. But I wish you would consider that. One last thing, I wish Mr. Howell was still here, because he was talking about he was tired about seeing the cigarette butts all around the parks in Howell Township. Well, I tell you, myself, I'm getting a little tired of seeing all the beer bottles around our Ardena one-room schoolhouse over there and picking them up before the school kids come in on their tours. And Mrs. Grattan, of course, when she has the once-a-month tours there, she has to go around, pick up all the beer bottles and throw them into the trash can, try and straighten the place up. It seems that it's the common place to have their beer busts, and, you know, you can't leave it like that when the school kids are coming. I don't know what can be done about it. It's illegal for them to be drinking. It is township property, but I don't know what can be done about it.
Mr. Smith had expressed this before. We had the discussion. We seem to have an issue, and we'll have to try to get more enforcement out there. And we've done this a couple times, and then it kind of dies down, and they start back up again. It seems that what happens is over on the softball fields at Oakland Park, when obviously it's the adults, but when the adults are playing, they then go over, sit on whether it's the truck or the cars, and drinking beer, and then they're throwing their bottles all over and things like that. So let me reach back out to the police department for better enforcement, and that's definitely a problem. And what I was going to recommend on the bill that's pending, I'll get copies so that mayor and council can read it and look through it.
I agree with Mr. Smith on this.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, because I say you sat both places when the onslaught came.
Couldn't agree more with
you.
you.
It was a scary situation. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, that was it for the public. Just some general announcements. Our next meeting is Tuesday, June 24th.
Somebody like to speak, Mayor, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Mr. McLaughlin, come on up.
He raised his hand.
Are you sure? I didn't see you. I apologize.
No.
I can get on the list.
No problem. Come on up. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Good evening, Mr. McLaughlin, 43 Yellowbrook Road. First, a general question. Patty Hoover is our housing official, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. And she would be in charge of doing inspections related to housing?
Yes.
And she currently is in charge of doing inspections related to housing?
Well, she's not in charge, but she's a housing officer.
She's one of the inspectors.
She's a housing officer.
And she would be the person who would do the inspections?
One of them. What's the,
All right, I'll get to it. The council is probably aware with my problem, it's been long going about but most recently, the Howell Township Zoning Board adopted a resolution granting an interpretation that the apartment right next to my house is agricultural labor housing. And the township officials, the land use department, has been aware right along that the person who lives there is handicapped, and he's not a farm laborer. All right, I brought this. It's really been driven home lately because now the guy has a handicapped van, a ramp going up to his door, a motorized wheelchair. Now this is an agricultural laborer, keep in mind, and I'll also point out that there's no, I guess, handicapped access to the stables. And he has a van that has the flip-down ramp for the motorized chair. I brought this to Mrs. Hoover's attention, and she informed me that she's been told by her superiors that she is not to do any inspections. That she's not allowed to do any inspections.
Stop right there, because what her duties are is really not an issue for this. This is not an issue for this chamber.
Why would that be?
Because it's a personnel issue, and that comes under the domain of the township manager.
I'm still asking you then, all right, I've heard this before. In either case, whether or not, I realize the council doesn't have a whole lot of control.
They do have none over personnel.
Sir, can I just
But this is the public forum for me to speak.
Sir,
all right?
you're going to be allowed to speak. But we're trying to get to the issue, which is, it sounds like you have a complaint about what the zoning board did.
No. Well, I do, but that's a separate issue.
Well,
the point as to what...
it's going to be unlikely.
Let me clarify something. The zoning board, see, I left this out. Part of the zoning board's resolution was that it be limited, this person be limited to a full-time laborer for the farm, and it's in the resolution. So this gets thrown back in land use now.
Okay.
Because they're up to uphold the resolution.
All right, so Mr. McLaughlin, your inquiry to the council, which will obviously direct to the right administrative liaison, is whose responsibility is it to respond to an inquiry by a resident who wants an inspection to be done to confirm that someone is compliant with either an ordinance or a regulation passed by a body or a commission?
Okay.
Is that your question?
That's correct, and I'd also like to bring to everybody's attention that according to Ms. Hoover, she is not allowed to perform her job.
We won't discuss
We won't discuss that.
Well, I'm stating it. all
You
right?
could state it,
Mr.
but it's
McLaughlin,
not...
I understand.
Yeah,
That's
we
it.
can't
Take it as
publicly
a fact.
comment about what an employee
All right.
may or may not respond to.
All right,
and
so that's
certainly
what I've been
it's
told by
irrelevant
Ms.
to the
Hoover.
discussion.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
here's how we're going to respond to this.
Okay.
The manager's office, what I'd recommend that you do, have you issued recently a letter or a complaint or something in writing to the township?
I did, but only to Mrs. Hoover.
Here's what-
Tomorrow, I'm going to file RTC, and I'm going to issue a letter. I'm going to send it to you, Mrs. Slagle.
Sure.
And I just wanted to bring up in the open tonight publicly. I understand you can't comment, you don't have to say it again, what I heard from Mrs. Hoover. All right, that's it. Now,
Put into writing your
I will.
concerns so the appropriate people can look into it.
I just wanted that
Great.
up in the public.
Okay. What
Okay,
else do you have for
my
us?
other issue is, and I did CC Mrs. Schlegel on this. I wrote a letter to Betty Lou Texter on February 28th in regards to, prior to the zoning board approving this, the Monmouth County Health Board requested that, and I'll also mention, this is after they did their inspections, they requested information as to the location of the septic. Not even apparently. The fact is, to this day, after township approvals, the zoning board's engineering approval and the Monmouth County Health Board's approval, the fact is, nobody knows where the septic is located. I'd also like to point out that my well is 30 feet from the property line. Another 30 feet past that is this structure. So you can see this is my concern. I've been through the community affairs people. I've been through the health department. I will state, in the health department's defense, at least they responded. I can't say the same for Mrs. Texter. I did not get a response
Mayor,
from
that's
her
5
to the
minutes.
state.
Okay.
All right, well, here's what I would request again, Mr. McLaughlin, so that we can be of assistance to you, is can you get a copy of the correspondence that you sent to Mrs. Texter, to our manager, so that her office can look into how the issue may have been internally handled, Mrs. Texter?
I also left a phone call message to Mrs. Slagle pointing this out. This letter was CC'd to her. I haven't received a response from anybody. Obviously, you could see this is my concern.
We appreciate your concern, and I can assure you there are no two people more responsive than Mrs. Texter and Mrs. Schlegel. I'm certain.
I have words about Mrs. Texter, and I disagree
Well,
with
and
that.
I'm not even going to entertain
Yeah,
them.
come on.
Not even going to entertain them.
I have a right to speak my mind, and she has been less than forthcoming right
Mr.
from the get-go.
McLaughlin, respectfully, we're not going to talk about any employee's performance, lack thereof. Those are your personal.
I got another issue.
Mr. McLaughlin, time out a minute.
Where do we do
Mr.
this
McLaughlin.
then? Where
Mr.
do we
McLaughlin.
do this?
I'll answer your question, okay?
Okay.
When there are concerns related to someone's employment, concerns about their performance, concerns about customer satisfaction, the appropriate way to handle them is through the township manager.
What happens if I don't get a response from her?
If you do not get a response from the township manager, then you could bring it to the attention of the mayor and council. However, to protect our employees' rights and to protect the fact that there are, or to address the fact that there are multiple sides to the story, what I've always encouraged a resident is if they don't get satisfaction with the manager, they should put their concerns, particularly if it relates to a personnel issue, in writing to the township council and myself. We can then confidentially and appropriately explore that matter with the manager, so we don't do it in the public domain, where these individuals don't have an ability to be here and respond with their potential point of view or additional information we may be privy to. So as a matter of courtesy and a matter of decorum, we do not entertain comments about employees where there could be multiple sides to the story. So in closing, get to the manager whatever correspondence you have.
I already sent it to her.
Well, then, if that's the case, I'm sure Mrs.
I certainly
Schlegel
do.
will identify it and give her an opportunity.
I don't need a copy.
Okay, give her an opportunity to review it and look at it. If after you are responded to by the manager's office, you are unsatisfied with that, I would encourage you to send the correspondence to the members of the council and myself. We will review it and, in the appropriate form, talk about it with the manager. Believe me, we're not brushing this under the rug, but there are certain protocols designed to protect our employees, and I'm going to see to it that we do that. And I appreciate your coming out
I'm definitely not accusing you
here.
of brushing it under the rug.
Okay.
As
All right, thank
far
you.
as the council goes, I'll say that. As far as everybody else?
Well, I can assure you that
Thank you.
we have, our manager and our department heads are fundamentally committed to providing the best service in the most responsive way. Mrs. Schlegel sets a shining example of how to be a professional every day, and her department heads do the same thing. All right, is there anyone else from the public who'd like to be recognized? Seeing no one, we're going to close the public portion. Just as an announcement, our next regular meeting is Tuesday, June the 24th. Executive session begins at 6:30. We begin our regular session for the public's participation at 7:30. Mrs. Schlegel, is there any other business for the council's consideration?
No, sir.
Hearing none?
I'll let you know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, go ahead.
24th, I will be late. Graduation.
Okay.
Okay, is that? Yeah, it's Colts Neck High School. Yeah, because I'm going to Howell on the 23rd.
Colts
Okay.
graduation is the 24th.
Yes, okay. All right, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Have a nice night, everyone.